Today we're talking about Gladiator. Before we get into our recap and analysis, quick introductions. I'm Gil, the voice of OneTake. I'm here with my brother Daniel.
You usually say what I should say. Hey, what's up?
And I'm here with my brother Alun.
Hey, what's up?
You guys were supposed to talk like this is ancient Rome. Ahoy! Now, if that's historically inaccurate, that was actually a reference to the fact that Gladiator is pretty historically inaccurate. And this being a historical movie, just like with Napoleon, I'm going to turn over the reins to Daniel. So Daniel's going to be hosting. Why don't you, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can then ask us our overall thoughts on Gladiator and like our experience growing up with it. Well, I'm glad you asked, Daniel.
Whoa. Now that you've handed power over to me, what makes you think I'm going to hand it back to you? I might
Go
just
ahead,
hold on to power.
Commodus.
You know what? I don't think we should have a dictatorship. No emperors here. We need a senate. All right.
Strength and honor.
Well, you know how I'd like to get started is I'd love to hear your guys' overall thoughts on Gladiator.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Alun because, Alun, it's fair to say this is... Well, you used to say Goodfellas is your favorite movie. I don't know if you still say that, but I know Gladiator's up there.
Yeah.
This, to me, in my mind, it's like your favorite.
It really might be my favorite movie. One day I need to really sit down and really think it through. I need like a good month locked in a room just to figure out my favorite movie. But
I need to sit down and really actually watch Gladiator.
Well, it's funny you say that because I don't remember the last time I watched it, but this time I paid a lot more attention to the politics of it. Like when I was a kid, I definitely was only paying attention to like the fighting and the action. This time, I actually paid attention to like the whole issue with the Senate and the senators' names and everything, and it's more interesting. Anyway, it might be my favorite movie of all time.
Well, I'll say, though, I forget who said it to me. Either Daniel or it might have been Adam, our other brother. But he recently rewatched Gladiator for the first time in years. And he was telling me, this movie, like I remember it as an action movie, but there's a lot more to it. There's all this political intrigue and stuff. So then I went into my rewatch expecting a lot of politics. And I'll say, if you go in with that attitude, you're kind of like, well, there is some politics, but like...
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard to follow at all. It's pretty basic politics, but to me as a kid, it just like went over my head. I didn't pay any attention to it.
It actually does get confusing at a few points, though. I'll say that, but it's not because they go in so deep into politics. It's because they actually like just don't really address a lot of things. But we'll get into it later in the recap.
But I want to talk for a second about why you love the movie so much.
A lot of quotable quotes. The action is great. The acting is great. Amazing dialogue. Character development is top tier. As a man, I love Rome. The music is awesome. I mean, everything about it is great.
I saw a video in the Associated Press where they were interviewing Denzel Washington for Gladiator II. And they were like, so have you seen this meme about how often men think about ancient Rome? And Denzel Washington's just like, when's the last time you thought about ancient Rome? He asked somebody, and he's like, when she asked me that question, I don't think about ancient Rome. And she's like, well, you must have been thinking about it a lot on set. And he's like, no, I was busy acting.
Huh.
That's very upsetting.
Yeah, I hope you be ready with like a witty response.
Yeah, I know. But I think, Alana, you basically said great action, great characters. That's a pretty simple response, but I think it's actually a pretty simple movie. It's 2.5 hours long. I think Daniel, you watched the theatrical cut. Alana, the version you watched, was it 2.5 hours or 2 hours and 50 minutes?
2 hours, 50 minutes.
Oh, so you're the only one of the three of us, you watched the extended cut.
Oh, I didn't even realize that.
It's a long movie, but I think it's actually a fairly straightforward movie. Mm-hmm. If you look at some of the critiques from critics, I think they'll talk about some of the lack of depth. Daniel, you talked about the politics getting a little muddled at certain points. But I'll say I agree with a lot of what I read from critics, but I don't think it makes it a bad movie. It just describes what the movie is. And I enjoyed this movie when I was younger, and I enjoyed rewatching it today, and I think it is for simple reasons. It's because Russell Crowe is awesome in this role. He doesn't show a lot of range, but that's because he's a very stoic character. He's a character that just does what needs to get done. But below that, he is seething with rage. For the first 40 minutes, he's seething with, I don't want to fight this war, but I got to do what I got to do so I can go home. Once going home is no longer an option, now it's I got to kill this one guy before I'm allowed to die and go to heaven. And anytime Russell Crowe is on screen, thanks to his performance, and I really notice the music. Anytime I watch a movie that's more than 10 years old, I really notice the music, because scores used to have melodies that you could hum. The score actually does a lot of work in this movie. Because to me, this movie so much comes down to, are you feeling what Russell Crowe is feeling? A lot of that comes from his performance, and then it gets further elevated by the score, and I pretty much felt it anytime he was on screen. So the few moments where he gets to meet the Emperor, take action, anytime there are action sequences, they were filled with so much emotion for me. And if you can keep that up for 2.5 hours or 2 hours and 50 minutes for the extended edition, I mean, to me, that's a great movie. Now, if you compare that to a hypothetical version of this movie, where you go into more depth on the political side, characters have a wider range, maybe there's an even better version of this movie that exists in some hypothetical reality. But the version we got, great movie. I've rewatched it many times, and I'm sure I'll watch it more times in the future.
And let's not forget Joaquin Phoenix. He's a really, really great villain in this movie.
Yeah, he is. They do a good job of, I can't say I've really empathized with him that much, because he does some stuff that makes him very easy to hate, but he is infused with enough humanity that he doesn't feel like a cartoon character, which is good setup. So I'll mention that Gladiator 2 is actually out in the UK right now. But Alun and I, we got to see it a little bit early. We got invited by YouTube to an early screening last week. So I don't want to spoil anything from that movie, except to say I'm going to praise Joaquin Phoenix's character for having a little bit of humanity and depth. And that's a reason why Gladiator 1 is good. Let's just put a pin in that, and we'll mention that again when we get to our Gladiator 2 review.
So the we you said did not include me. So I don't know anything about Gladiator 2, but I do know that the villain, I believe, is Caracalla, who was one of the emperors of Rome, who, from what I remember, was even worse than Commodus. So, if it turns out he's just cartoonishly evil, there's some historical precedent for that take.
So I think Daniel now is trying to sort of peacock how much Rome knowledge he has to make me feel bad, because I was allowed to bring one person with me to the screening. And I'm like, at least Alun says Gladiator might be his favorite movie. I've never even heard Daniel flirt with the idea.
No.
He was like, yeah, I think I've seen that. You said Gladiator? Yeah, I think I've seen that movie.
Listen, if you end up getting invited to some Rome documentary, then bring Daniel. But this is more my jam.
I am seething with rage right now.
Daniel, if you go to a Rome documentary, please don't bring me. I don't know if I
I love Gladiator is one of my favorite movies, I would say.
Oh, you should have said that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Anyway. I want to put one more stake in the ground in defense of this movie, which is that it's also not super original. But, Roman epics were very popular in the 50s and 60s, but it's one of those subgenres that's so great because it's the perfect backdrop for epic stories, for intrigue, life and death stakes, the gladiators, the Colosseum. It's such a great place to visit in storytelling that I think it's worth every couple of decades going back to it, especially as technology improves, to re-render ancient Rome and get another look at it. So that's kind of a similar argument I used in defense of Alien Romulus, where, yeah, we've seen the xenomorph a million times, but it's a pretty frightening and formidable monster. What does it look like in 2024? I think it's a question worth asking every once in a while.
It's like how it's 2024, but people still make pixel-based games, but using modern methodologies.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think I made that exact same comparison when we talked about 1992's Dracula, because in that movie, he used all the same film techniques they used to use decades ago. But it's like, what if we use the limitations from the 30s, but with today's innovation and carry that format forward. So it's like making pixelated games today. What can we do today with that format?
One other thing about this movie that I also just want to highlight, though, is as I watched it, and you don't see it in modern movies as much, is how amazing of a hero Maximus Decimus Meridius is. Like, we don't see just pure, like, normal humans that are just absolute heroes anymore. Like, Maximus is just amazing throughout the movie. Now, he goes through a dark period, right, where he kind of, like, almost gives up on everything, but ultimately, like, he does everything he can for, like, his men, for the Republic, for Lucilla. Like, he's just doing, like, all the right things for everybody. And it's, like, strength and honor. And I just think that's so awesome. And you, like, don't see it, like, in that pure form.
I don't know how true that is. I mean, this happens a lot later in the movie, but because of him, a bunch of his fellow gladiators were killed, not even in the ring, while they're just locked up waiting for the next day, you know, when all the soldiers came. So if it weren't for him, that wouldn't have happened.
Well, but they all would have died no matter what. And they chose to defend Maximus, you know, in the interest of the Republic.
But were you going to say no to him?
He said you could say no.
Maximus is really good at getting you riled up, like ready to go. Like then afterward, you're like, "What was I thinking?"
Oh, wait. Speaking of which, we'll get to it in the recap. There are a lot of motivational speeches in this movie where, like, if I heard it in real life, I don't know how motivated I would actually be.
If you see green fields around you, don't worry. You're just in Elysium. You're already dead. As soon as I hear that, I'd be like Abe Simpson, where he just walks in and then walks out. Like, where are you going? And I'm like, I'll see you in Elysium. You can go have fun.
All right. Shall we jump into the recap?
You're the host. If you feel like we've covered overall thoughts enough, then go ahead.
I'm now seizing the reins. But, you know, feel free to jump into overall thoughts at any point.
Dale, you were giving the reins like 20 minutes ago.
Go ahead,
all
Caesar.
Right. So we begin the movie. First, the screen is black. The lights turn on. We see a guy sitting on the edge of a moon.
Hold on.
You're already spoiling something.
You're spoiling the immersion because you say we start the movie. Now I'm like aware that I'm watching a movie. You have to get me into the world of the story.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
There's a guy sitting on a moon. He's fishing or something. Suddenly, DreamWorks.
I did think the shot of the moon in the movie was interesting. It didn't feel like the movie's vibe to me. Anyway, that's another. Do you remember that? They showed.
Yeah, I had that in my notes.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry, we're going to talk about that. But
right.
Bravo, Daniel. That was good. Yeah,
okay, I was... Go ahead. I was going to continue with the joke of running through each of the production things before the movie starts. But I actually didn't finish preparing my notes on that anyway. So, all right.
Now he's recapping his process of putting these notes together.
So Daniel's sitting there. Gil's texting him, "Are you going to be ready for 5 o'clock today?" In a sweat, Daniel remembers that he was supposed to be recapping Gladiator. ChatGPT, can you please recap Gladiator for me?
But in the tone of my voice.
At the height of its power, the Roman Empire was vast, stretching from the deserts of Africa to the borders of northern England. And I might add, from like western Spain all the way to like somewhere far east.
Now he's rewriting the movie. All right, continue.
Over 1/4 of the world's population lived and died under the rule of the Caesars. I think that's like roughly accurate from what I remember. In the winter of 180 AD, Emperor Marcus Aurelius's 12-year campaign against the barbarian tribes in Germania was drawing to an end. Just one final stronghold stands in the way of Roman victory and the promise of peace throughout the empire. I can continue if no reaction. All right.
That was just the opening crawl. That was like reading the opening crawl to Star Wars: A New Hope. Like, what do you think?
Oh, man.
We haven't seen anything yet.
Man. Sounds like I should move a little faster.
If you want us to really pick it apart, I think those production logos, they actually kind of dimmed the colors a little bit because they felt like it was too bright of a start. So I thought that was a good choice.
I wasn't paying attention during that part.
All right, we have our first epic battle. Maximus and his army prepare for battle with the barbarians as they await the return of a diplomat that they sent to the barbarians. When the diplomat returns on his horse without a head, and the barbarian army appears, one of them holding that diplomat's head, it seems battle will be made. People should know when they're conquered. But these barbarians don't. Maximus gives a speech.
Would I?
Would I?
Great line.
Strength and honor. Maximus gives a speech that is supposedly motivating to his men. Something about how they're all probably going to die.
I thought it was motivating.
And then he leads a group of cavalry that flanks the enemy during the battle. Maximus enters the fray, has a lot of epic one-on-one battles with people, and ultimately the Romans are victorious.
This opening battle is wildly inaccurate. The Roman legions were trained to fight as a regimented force and to maintain formation for mutual support. In the film, the formation collapses instantly upon contact with the enemy. In addition to being inaccurate, this would have almost certainly led to a... So this is from, if you watch on Amazon, you have the little x-ray, and it comes up with goofs throughout the movie. And I was reading this, I'm like, this is an interesting fact. But I also wanted to be like, you f*** off! Wildly inaccurate? Like, what's this editorializing? And if you listen to the Ridley Scott commentary, you can hear he's very defensive. He'll mention, we brought on all these historical experts, and they would tell me these things. Like throughout the movie, he'll be like, they said they would never wear something like that. And I was like, oh, really? Did they write that down? Do you know every single thing they did in Rome? So you know for a fact they didn't do that? But then even when they were like, oh, that's historically accurate, and they agreed with Ridley Scott, he'd still be like, oh, really? And you know that for a fact.
You know what? I respect that. He made the movie he wanted to make, no matter what. Regarding the formation thing, I did not notice that, but now that you mention it, it actually is interesting because during the Gladiator matches, when they were all like on the same team, Maximus really was focused on formation, like staggered column, single column.
That's right. Well, and even during this battle, at one point, he almost accidentally hits his own.
He was like, ah. And they smiled at him.
They kind of smile at each other. Yeah, and Ridley Scott was saying on the commentary, if everyone's getting covered in mud, you'd soon stop recognizing each other. And I'm like, well, actually, that's wildly inaccurate. If they stayed in formation, maybe that wouldn't have happened. But we talked about the Elysium thing. But even before that, you see Maximus walking in the wheat field and brushing his hands over it. And that becomes this repeated motif that refers to the afterlife. And I think you start with that. And then you have in his motivational speech, we're all probably going to die. Ooh. It really sets up the theme of mortality in this movie. Yeah. And
Sorry. Go ahead. You finish.
What? It really makes it feel like from the beginning, Maximus already has kind of one foot in the grave. He knows he's dying, but there's things that need to get done before that can happen. And I think that ties into... So Roger Ebert, one of his complaints about this movie is that it thinks everyone just looking depressed and morose is a good enough replacement for actual character development. So he gave the movie 2 out of 4 stars.
Jeez.
And he said it's like Rocky, but like a dour version of it. But to me, it's almost a fair comparison. It is like Rocky, but I wouldn't say dour. I would say stoic. It's and Daniel, wasn't Marcus Aurelius, he was a practitioner of stoicism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm going to really oversimplify and say it's basically the idea of self-control. Control what you can, accept what you can't. So if you know your path is leading to death and there's no possible way off of it, you don't cry about it, you don't complain about it, you just do what needs to get done. And you see that stoicism from Maximus throughout the movie. And I don't think, Ridley Scott will say the movie is partly about mortality. I don't think it has a whole lot to say on the subject. But I think having that theme there, at minimum, just makes this movie taste a little bit different. If you were to compare it to just a standard action movie, just having that other layer makes Maximus a little bit more interesting. The movie gets your attention a little bit more, and it does kind of elevate it. It grabs your attention instead of just feeling like something standard you've already seen before.
I just want to say I think you guys are crapping on his speech a little too much. I don't think you guys are reading into it correctly.
Well, I want to say I don't think I crapped on it at all. That was
Daniel's crapping on it.
And I want to clarify my crapping on it. It's a good speech. What I'm really saying is I would be terrified, and I don't think I would find it motivating because I don't want to die.
Here's where you're misled. It wasn't intended to be motivational because at this point, they have fought so many armies, so many barbarian hordes. They have no doubt they're going to be victorious. He's just joking around with them. They're already motivated. They already know they're going to win. They know that they will suffer some losses. They're not delusional, but they literally don't need a speech at all at this point. So I think motivation wasn't even really the goal of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the problem with this is that whenever one of us says something, I think we all feel compelled to sort of agree, and then we end up following them. Because if you can read my notes here, I don't think I used the word motivational once at this part. I just meant to bring up the Elysium thing humorously, and then Daniel went off on a whole tangent. And I followed him, so I agree with the line. But I like. There's another line in there, by the way. What we do in life echoes in eternity.
That's a good one.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that was meant to be motivational, I think, Alon.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
I don't think. Wait, to counter Alon's point, I don't think he gave the speech as a joke, though.
He laughed. They were laughing about it.
Around.
He's like, "This'll kill them." Okay, hey everyone, listen. Before we go fight, actually, no, I'm turning it around now. I think the speech as overall was meant to be somewhat motivational.
Yes,
but not because they thought they were going to lose. It's because they're tired of fighting.
Yeah.
And then we got one more battle, but we can't just rest on our laurels. They already beheaded our messenger, and I love that guy. He was awesome. But so I think, but the Elysium thing definitely was meant somewhat humorous.
So I guess the main thing Daniel's
he
saying
does
that
laugh.
So I think the main thing I disagree with Daniel on, the specific part of what Daniel was spouting, was that if Daniel were in that position, he would not have been terrified because he would be in the same position as all the other soldiers that already had such an inflated ego and sense of confidence.
Let's go back to the production logos. I think we're moving too fast through this movie.
Wait, 1 second. I was spouting? Spouting? Okay.
I love during the
spout a lot
battle. Okay, here's another thing that they do interesting during the battle. It's not just a straight up action sequence. There's plenty of action, but on top of that, as the battle progresses, it starts to take on a more melancholy tone. I mean, from the beginning, you can see in Maximus's eyes, he's like, I got to go fight another battle. I have no interest in doing this. And as the battle goes, the music gets sad. It starts to, the frame rate kind of changes. Things slow down a little bit. And I think it takes on, this movie, it kind of gets to have its cake and eat it too, because the whole movie has this tone of, there's the bloodthirsty mob in Rome that wants to see these gladiator matches, but they're jerks for wanting that. Violence is terrible. At the same time, we're going to revel in a little bit of violence, because it's like, actually going back to, Daniel, what you said earlier with how much of a hero Maximus is. Like, he's doing all this stuff for the Roman Empire. He's doing all this stuff for his friends. And the movie does manipulate events in a very convenient way so that him getting revenge is the best thing he can possibly do. Not only does he get revenge, but he also gets to save Rome. It's like the movie, it gets to subvert violence while also reveling in it. And so I was trying to pay attention. Why did this movie, it was not like completely crapped on by critics, but it wasn't beloved universally. And I think these are the reasons why.
It's funny you talk
some
about
of them.
It's funny you talk about the movie having its cake and eating it too. So I did hear a fact about the movie and the production or like the writing of the script, where someone wanted Maximus to die in the end and his family to survive. Someone else wanted his family to die or the other way around. And then they were like, wait a minute, let's just have his family die. So that way him dying is his goal. So that way it's like you get to have the sad ending of him dying, but also the happy ending of him being with his family again. So they're literally like just it's kind of like when they're afraid to have a character do something in a movie. So then they show him do it. Then they're like, oh, wait a minute. He didn't really do it. He was just thinking it. But you know what I'm saying?
You
it's like
hate that. Yeah,
well, I mean, because like they were too afraid to actually do it, So
just to paint a picture so people understand what you're saying. For example, there's a scene in The Boys. I forget if it might have been season 2 or 3, where Homelander just laser cuts an entire audience in half with his eyes. And Alon's like, whoa! And then cut. It turns out that was a little moment of fantasy for him. And so Alun's saying that's a way to have your cake and eat it too. We want to show this, but if we really do that and like have to wrestle with that in the story, let's just make it a little fantasy moment or a hallucination.
Yeah. But anyway, that's the idea. They were able to accomplish both feelings, and they did it really well.
Yeah, it's kind of like we're seeing how the sausage is made. At the end of the day, though, this is a delicious sausage. I was trying to. I mean, there's a lot of great lines in this movie. You know, that made me think of other great lines. Strength and honor. At my signal, unleash hell. Now, Maximus delivered them better than I am right now.
At my signal, unleash hell.
Yeah. Ridley Scott's like, Russell, you know, can we try that again? All right. At my signal, unleash hell. At my signal.
That's a tasty sausage.
These pretzels are making me thirsty.
We need you to up the intensity. All right. At my signal.
Ow.
Ow.
Unleash hell. All right.
Commodus arrives. Commodus, the son of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, arrives with his sister Lucilla. Commodus is excited because he thinks his father, Marcus Aurelius, is going to die soon. And obviously he's going to name him as successor. Separately, we see Maximus and Marcus Aurelius talking. And Maximus says to Marcus Aurelius he wants to go home back to his farm. But then we cut to Commodus appearing and a bunch of ominous music is playing. So we kind of know Commodus is going to disrupt these plans. Sorry, this just is in a weird order. All right. And then, this scene, they're cutting back and forth. It's confusing. As
the troops to prove yourself. After Napoleon, everyone was like,
hey, Napoleon was a tour de force.
Yeah, me too. Actually, our editor, I don't know if I told you this, Daniel, that Napoleon episode's still his favorite episode. He said he could listen to you talk about history all day. And I was like, then why don't you marry him?
As the troops honor Maximus for the great victory, Commodus arrives and asks his father, have I missed it? Have I missed the battle? And Marcus Aurelius responds, my son, you have missed the war.
Yeah, there are moments where they make it so like I can understand why Commodus would be the way that he is. I don't think Marcus was that great a father. We'll get to some of that. But think about the introductory line. The first thing we hear Commodus say. Do you think he's really dying? Like he's so excited that his dad might die. And then, have I missed the battle? Like it's just so fake. And then he tells Marcus Aurelius, his father, I'm going to slaughter 100 bulls to honor you. And you're just like, who sent this guy? Why is it? Like this movie has already put us in the mindset of having a distaste for violence. And now this jerk comes in and he's like, I'm going to kill 100 innocent bulls. I've never done anything wrong to anybody. But it is funny how that's presented as this totally nonsensical idea. It would be the equivalent of, in a modern movie, a character making the same suggestion. But you have to think that's something that's been done before. I'm sure Commodus got the idea from somewhere. But it is setting up the theme that Marcus wants to move Rome into this more enlightened age with a republic, and Commodus wants to take them back. He likes the idea of an empire. So slaughtering bulls, that's an old-fashioned idea, I assume, that Marcus has moved beyond. Commodus hasn't.
Commodus, what a dunce.
He should have used the bulls in the arena. I mean, if he was going to sacrifice them anyway.
Yeah, honestly.
Just have Maximus just surrounded by 100 bulls.
All right, it's time to party. So they're celebrating that night after the battle. Maximus is reunited with his second in command, Quintus. Good guy, Quintus. We love him throughout the movie. Yeah. And they discuss how eager Maximus is to return to being a farmer. Quintus remarks, Maximus the farmer. I have a hard time picturing that. Commodus introduces Maximus to Senators Gaius and Senator Falco. Senator Gaius is pro-republic rather than empire. Commodus then pulls Maximus aside and says, these politicians, they're scheming and scheming. They're a threat to Rome. He asks Maximus, when the time comes, will you side with me? Will you help me save Rome from the politicians? But Maximus says he just wants to go home. Commodus does not accept this, and he says, don't get too comfortable. One day I'm going to call on you.
Anytime a character more than once mentions something they're looking forward to in the future, I'm going to go home one day. Even when he says it to Marcus Aurelius, Marcus's response is, home. I'm like, he's not going home.
Yeah, they didn't even show the rest of that conversation. You didn't need to.
And just in terms of Commodus being a jerk and just setting him up as such a villain, so early on, he's already floating the idea, you're not going home. I'm going to need you to do a lot more killing. And actually, this made me think there was an idea for Gladiator 2 years ago. I think most people have probably heard this fun fact, but there was a screenplay written for Gladiator 2 that was going to go full-on supernatural, where Maximus is resurrected by the gods and sent back to Earth.
Wait,
and
he dies in this?
Oh yeah, sorry, spoil. Yeah, I forgot. We like in our recaps, it's meant for people who haven't seen the movie yet, so I'm trying not to spoil anything. But I was almost, as I'm rewatching the movie, I was like, that sequel kind of makes sense to me, because so much of this movie is about how Maximus just has to be a killer. He has to keep fighting. He's a tool that's being used by the Emperor, and it just never ends. It only ends when he dies. And then this sequel would say, even then it doesn't die. Once the Emperor's done with you, now the gods are going to take their turn. And I was like, I don't know, that makes sense to me. That could have actually been a great sequel. And notice I'm hypothetically saying there could have been a great sequel to Gladiator.
Sad.
But there might have been a good sequel. I'm not going to say anything.
Quick historical commentary on here. So this is one of the things I mentioned to Gil earlier, that even with, there's like a couple just cringeworthy from a historical perspective moments. And to me, like, I don't even know that you need to know the history to find it a little cringeworthy when Senator Gaius is like, Republic, Republic, when Commodus is describing that, because like, it's just ridiculous. Like, on the face of it, like, you're not going to say in front of a king that you want to get rid of the monarchy. Just like, obviously, nobody's really going to say that openly. But then the historical context is like, at this point, there was no debate of like bringing back the Republic. Like, at this point, we've had, I forget, like 200 years of emperors. Like, the whole concept of a republic is completely outside the Overton window. There is a Senate, and they're I know you're impressed by my usage of that term. So, Senate, and there's definitely debates. Are you trying to do the applause sound?
Oh, did it not come? Oh, yeah, that's the problem with StreamYard, is the noise cancellation on it. It thinks the applause is noise, so it cancels it out.
So the last point was like,
kind of.
So there was definitely like some struggles of, senators, people vying for more power. I don't think at this point there was any discussion of like actually bringing back a republic. The Senate had completely fallen out of being a functional organization. Like, even I think even Augustus Caesar, who was like the first real like emperor who created the whole Principate like system, like, he got frustrated because he couldn't rely on the senators to do anything. Like, they just completely fell apart as an organization that could function. So anyway, this whole idea, and it comes back obviously throughout the movie, of bringing back the Republic is like completely ridiculous. But, within the movie, I like it as the plot line. But like, historically,
those are really good points. Gil, I can see why you brought me to the Gladiator 2 screening, though.
Fight. I want to fight him.
Listen, I actually would be interested in an alternate universe where we had another Gladiator movie like this that was more realistic. I would be interested to see that as well, So,
but what I'm saying in terms of, so the historical inaccuracy isn't really a criticism I have of the movie. Like, I don't mind them rewriting history for the sake of this plot. The one part, though, I do think, and I guess it's okay, it's not what the movie is, but to me, on the face of it, just like this senator actively saying that he wants to bring back the Republic in front of like the Emperor, to me, like, I don't know, I think you need something a little more subtle. Like, it just feels ridiculous.
Well, no, that's a good point, especially knowing that he might be a little nuts.
Yeah, I think in general, the political I don't know if intrigue is the right word, but anything that alludes to the politics of the time don't really work in this movie. Here, it's really minor, and it's not something I really picked out or noticed. It doesn't really become a real issue for me until later in the movie. But yeah, I agree with all that, Daniel. There is also, I think it would have happened by this point in your recap, but there's a shot where Maximus sees Commodus practicing sword fighting. And I think that's maybe one of only 2 times where we see him practicing with a sword. And it reminded me a little bit of House of the Dragon, where we kind of coined a new phrase where it feels like they're pointing the camera defensively. They're like, wait a minute. If Maximus is going to fight Commodus later, it wouldn't make sense unless Commodus has some like actual skill as a fighter. Let's insert like a 3-second shot of him earlier in the movie where he's fighting.
He was really good at spinning the sword. Remember when he was just sitting there playing with it?
Oh, so on that point though, Commodus did. I can't remember if he ever actually fought in a gladiatorial match. I think he probably didn't, but he was really into gladiator games. Like in reality, like he was into it. He would definitely like play gladiator stuff with people. And in general, like the gladiators, they were typically slaves, right? It's like a kind of degenerate thing to do in their society. Similar, he was also really into theater and acting, which again was also sort of like what the degenerates did.
He's into gladiator games, like would that be like PlayStation, Atari, or like stupid? Alone he puts me in a silly mood when he's here.
Sorry.
So at the end of the conversation between Commodus and Maximus, Commodus tells Maximus that Lucilla, Commodus' sister, has not forgotten him, and now Maximus is the great man. We see more of Lucilla. Lucilla and Marcus Aurelius are reunited. He tells her that Commodus is going to need her now more than ever, setting the basis for, something is going to happen with Commodus. But enough of politics. They then pretend to be a loving father and a loving daughter. It is a pleasant fiction.
Good father and a loving daughter.
Let me quickly edit that.
But when I turn this into Gil later and get my grade.
Yeah, that was a pretty pleasant fiction.
Yeah, so it's a line from the movie.
One thought I had, I guess, like, what are we supposed to think about Lucilla at this point? Right? I think, like, when we look at this scene with the whole view of Lucilla throughout the movie, we think of this whole pleasant fiction thing like it's a joke, right? Like obviously they love each other and Lucilla's generally a good person. But I guess at this point in the movie, we actually don't really know who Lucilla is, right? Like you kind of, like, obviously a lot of that scene's played in jest, but you do kind of wonder, like, is Lucilla like Commodus, right? Like you see them together. Like, are we supposed to think that at this point in the movie? Like, we're not sure whether she's good or not.
At this point, have Lucilla and Maximus had their conversation where with the whole bad liar thing? Yeah, the impression I get from Marcus is that he probably wasn't that present a father, probably too busy being emperor. And like later he'll say to Commodus, your faults as a son are my failures as a father, which is just such a great line.
Yeah.
But I assume it was similar with his daughter, Lucilla, but I think she happened to just turn out better. I don't know if I were to think back at this point in the movie, like, where's my barometer on her character? I don't recall exactly, but I don't remember ever getting a bad vibe from her.
I think there's a little bit of tell, don't show in this scene where Marcus Aurelius says to her, if only you had been born a man. Because I think the implication there is that he thinks she is more serious, more moral than Commodus and would have been able to serve after him. So I think without that line, I think the rest of the scene doesn't really tell you much about her. But I think that one line is kind of meant to imply to you she's like the opposite of Commodus.
So that part of the scene was actually interesting too, and part of what I think makes Lucilla interesting is he says to her, like, you would have been a great leader or something like that, like what you were saying. He then specifically says, but would you have been, I think it was just, it was some type of moral term, and she says, I would have been whatever you told me to be.
Taught me.
And it's like, that's just a funny response.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Well, I guess
It doesn't
don't
really.
you want your kid to turn out however you teach? So that's actually a good response. It's like I want my kid to just be however I teach them to be.
All right. Marcus Aurelius asks one last duty of Maximus. Surprise! Maximus not going home. Marcus Aurelius laments that his whole life was spent in war, and that the dream that was once Rome is dying. He asks Maximus one last duty: to take over as emperor with one end alone, to give power back to the people and end the corruption that plagues Rome. Maximus refuses, and that is why Marcus Aurelius says it must be him. He doesn't want the power, he is not corrupted. But what about Commodus? Why can't he take over? Marcus Aurelius says he is not a moral man. He cannot rule. Maximus is the son that he should have had. Maximus needs some time to think about this.
Yeah, I love how Marcus says to him, there was once a dream that was Rome. You could only whisper it, anything more than a whisper, and it would vanish. It was so fragile, and I fear that it will not survive the winter. Now, why don't you tell me about your home? You got to be real careful with this. You don't say it out loud, but your home, you could talk all about that, and that's going to work out fine.
Yeah. Maximus never should have admitted to anyone that he had a wife and son.
Yeah, true.
That's something you keep secret.
Yeah.
I have more to say about this, but not yet. I think we need a little more context first.
Okay. Like I said, the whole idea of restoring the Republic, just historically, definitely not going to happen at this point. One other point, the whole succession thing is interesting, right? So Marcus Aurelius planned for a long time to make Commodus heir. This was like in the movie, it's sort of like at the last minute. It's like he's making some decision. He named Commodus as heir 14 years before he died, and they co-ruled together for 3 years. For many years, Marcus was grooming Commodus to rule. And a lot of people hear this and they say, like, why? Like, why would you make Commodus, the successor? So Marcus is the last of the 5 great emperors. One of the reasons we had 5 great emperors in a row in Roman history was none of them named biological heirs. They actually just chose the person that was best suited for the role. But the reason that happened is none of them had male heirs. So it's not like Marcus Aurelius broke from tradition. He's just the first one who actually had a male heir.
Gotcha. It does feel, in the context of the movie, you're like, is Maximus the best one for the job? Like, you would think that Marcus had been spending all these years, because he knows that Commodus cannot take over. And in the context of the movie and its version of events, he's probably known that for a long time. And I feel like he should have been on the lookout, or should have been grooming somebody else for the position. Maximus feels like a weird choice. But I guess, actually, having said that, he's not going to be emperor. He's just there as a temporary role just to oversee the transition back to the Senate. It makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it could have been anyone that he trusted, that he knew was moral. And I guess he's surrounded by a bunch of politicians, which nobody seems to trust. So it's got to be someone who's not a politician. And I mean, Maximus has shown his loyalty to Rome. So, I mean, listen, it makes sense. And also, like, even in history of the world, like, people who served often went on to rule. It's been said to happen.
True, and he's like Marcus said, because you don't want the job, that's why you're the right person for it.
That was a
you
great
would be
line.
Unselfish about it. Yeah.
And we've talked about this, but they do such a good job of making you just want Maximus to be able to go home. And I love when characters do this. How long has it been since you've been home? 2 years, 264 days, and this morning. Yeah. I love it always when a character talks that way.
Yeah, I used to have on my desk at school, I taped a little paper to my desk that just had a checkbox for every day of the year, counting down till summer vacation. And every day it was like I was in prison, just like etching on the wall.
Dude, sorry, you just remind me. I got in trouble once because I also had a calendar where I was marking the days, and I had doodles all over my calendar, my agenda or whatever it was, my calendar, and I had like I drew like, I don't know, like fireworks, a celebration for like some day we had off, and then our parents were asked to come in and talk with me and my teacher because I wasn't doing too well in a class. And then she was like, let's take a look at like how you organize your notes, your calendar and everything. So they looked through it and they're like, you like they saw how much I hated school, and like they're like, this is what you're doing all day. You're drawing doodles on all over your calendar and you're celebrating the days you have off. And anyway, you just reminded me. I would draw all that during class.
They're not doodles. They're minerals.
Okay.
So I had a joke in mind of it's insulting to call them doodles. You know, it's like art. But then as I was about to say it, I was like, but it'd be funnier if I said minerals.
I've been drawing the exact same doodle since I was a kid. It's always the same ones.
Homer Simpson, Calvin, Garfield.
Anyway. The one doodle I can do is Homer Simpson, which I learned from you. All right, Maximus is not happy after this meeting with Marcus Aurelius. He's pacing back and forth, troubled, and Lucilla approaches him. She wants to know what did Aurelius ask him about, but he lies. Lucilla knows he's lying. He's never had a talent for it, unlike her. She asks Maximus if he will serve Commodus like he served Marcus Aurelius. Maximus says he will always serve Rome. We learn that Lucilla's husband died recently and that she has an 8-year-old son, Lucius, the same age as Maximus's son, and she still prays for Maximus.
Yeah, it kind of bothered me a little bit that their sons are roughly the same age, because so much of the core of this movie is Maximus's love for his wife. And it's, of course, implied that him and Lucilla were together at some point. It's implied maybe Lucius is actually Maximus's son. And if they're the same age, that means that he was with Lucilla at the same time he was with his wife.
Wait,
or
why
right before?
I never even thought that. When does it imply that Lucius might be his own son?
They were together. They said that. Why would she
yeah,
mention that? I'm just saying, you listen, there's been questions about it. Nobody knows like the answer, but it has been up for debate. Like since the movie
never even crossed my mind. Not once. I just assumed this was like a past romance before Maximus met his wife.
Damn, do I have to rewrite all his entire notes for this now?
Wait, it never even occurred to me.
To me, it was it was like a Mandela effect thing where I just remembered that he's his son. And then rewatching the movie, I'm like, well, they never actually say that, but they imply that they were together. So, and I just see people have always talked about the movie like Lucius might be his son.
So you know what that would explain a little bit is like, so Maximus, so this is the other, I mean, I was going to ask you guys, like, what do we know about their background? You guys have a lot more thoughts than I had, but like, he really does not want to talk with her. And I was debating, like, okay, what is that? So partly he criticizes her morality, right? Like, she's a good liar and all this stuff. But I also thought partly, like, obviously they're into each other. There's some amount of, like, shame, right? If he doesn't want to even look at her because he loves his wife.
Yeah.
And I guess if he cheated on his wife with her, that kind of makes it make more sense.
Yeah, I like to imagine that when he was with her, it was right before he married his wife. So, like, let's just assume he didn't cheat, because that ruins just his heroic.
The ages just
character.
make it so that the ages of the children make it so that could just barely be true. But I wish it wasn't even gray at all.
Yeah.
Having said that, I like how restrained they were with the romance, because if it went any further than a kiss, it would have kind of sullied a little bit him returning to heaven to his wife.
Wait, just to be clear on the ages of the children, though, is they could have been together several years before they had kids. Like, that doesn't imply that they had to have cheated on each other's spouses.
His son with Lucilla was born at the same time as his son with his wife.
But that's you assuming, yeah.
Oh,
That's assuming that.
It's in the trailer for the Gladiator 2. It's in the trailer.
Really?
Yeah, Gil and I were trying not to give it away.
It's just I know people listening to this know that Lucius is his son.
And this hat. Oh, I didn't even know Gladiator 2 is about Lucius.
We didn't say that.
Oh, damn!
Man,
I gotta.
You just kept pushing us, man.
Yeah,
that's so funny. You know, because I've avoided every like. Man.
That's pretty funny.
Okay, all right, fine. I give in.
But we still don't know if he cheated. He might have had Lucius, broke up with her instantly, then met this other woman, married her instantly, and had another kid immediately.
I think he cheated, but this is the same thing I said about Napoleon.
Which I cut out of the podcast because I was afraid it came off as tasteless.
Let me see if I can say it. We're supposed to judge them by the morality of their time. Whatever.
And I remember I tried to defend it. I was like, well, Daniel, yes, but through today's lens, we can look back at it. And I was like, let's cut the whole thing.
I condemn infidelity in all forms in every period of human history.
Well, don't say anything bad about Maximus. But anyway, one thing he is bad at is lying. And I thought, listen, if this were any other movie and we weren't like, we love this movie, so it doesn't feel good to hit it at all. But I think we'd accuse the scene between Maximus and Lucilla of being one of those classic, so how long has it been since we last saw each other? I'm really a political person and you're not. And by the way, wink, wink, we used to be together, remember? It's kind of one of those classic exposition scenes. Having said that, I do enjoy the language they use here. You know, you're a bad liar, Maximus. I never acquired your comfort for it. You know, one of the fun things of setting a movie in this time is that we are very accepting of sort of theatrical language. And so you get to say lines like that. But I'll also say, you know, when people complain that this movie is not very complex or deep, I think you start to see examples of that here. And alone, like you said, is a lot of tell, don't show. She says she has to lie all the time for politics. When do we see that? We never see that. And so it feels like there's this whole political game happening on the side. You just see little bits of it.
Well, we do see the way she interacts with her brother.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. He's pretty much the only one where she's kind of lying to, and she says what he wants to hear. You know, like she'll be like, you can't let him go unpunished, even though she, you know, things like that.
I might just cut. Actually, that sounds really stupid because her whole life is a lie. Every time she's with her brother, and it's terrible.
Wait, so if you seem stupid, you get to just cut it out of the podcast? But if I seem stupid, you play it on repeat.
Okay, wait, here, let me redeem myself. So, okay, there are politics in the movie, but they're very straightforward.
Okay.
I want you to be emperor, Maximus, but I want to be emperor. That's basically all the politics. I think it should be an empire. Well, I think it should be a republic. And that's obviously the better one because this movie is made with today's morality through today's lens.
Well, from my perspective, the Jedi are evil. They're minerals.
And then I have a note here. It just says, I have complaints about simplicity is like the headline. And then I have the bullets. The only politics are straightforward. I want you to be emperor, but I want to be emperor. My next bullet just says Rome.
Yeah,
I don't know what that means.
Maximus goes back to his tent or something, and he sees Cicero, who's like his sort of aide or something like that, and he asks him if he ever has a hard time to do his duty. Sometimes I do what I want to do. The rest of the time, I do what I need to do. Maximus tells him we may not be able to go home after all. That's a quick scene. I think I can move on.
Wait, he's not going to get to go home?
They're probably not going to get to go home.
Was he going to take him with him?
I think Cicero goes wherever Marcus goes, or Maximus.
So you think he's like actually is like private, like he works for him directly. It wasn't like he wasn't like assigned to him by the Roman army or something.
I don't know.
We didn't really learn much about him.
I think it's implied that they go wherever, with each other.
Yeah.
I could tell whatever was being discussed, I didn't have to pay attention to. I'll let them work this out.
We can cut that out. Marcus Aurelius meets with Commodus. Oh my God. All right. He asks Commodus, are you ready to do your duty for Rome? Psych, your duty for Rome is to not be the emperor. He tells him he's not going to be made emperor. It's instead going to pass to Maximus with the intent of restoring the Republic. Commodus takes this like a little personally, I think. He laments that his father never loved him, and that's all he ever wanted. He then says, I would butcher the whole world if you would only love me. He then hugs his father to death.
I mean, we know that in order to show his love to his son, he would have to make him emperor anyway. It's not like he could have shown him love and then been like, but the emperor thing is off the table. Like, that's really all he cared about. When he said, I wish you loved me, he really meant, I wish you made me emperor.
Right. I think what Marcus says here, your faults as a son are my failure as a father, I think is very true, because it's like you said, Alon, he's set things up so that at this point, there is no way for him to show enough love that will make him satisfied with anything less than being emperor. And in life, a firing, a breakup, that kind of major move typically should not come as a surprise. A person should know that that's coming, and it shouldn't be left to reading between the lines. Commodus is like, well, you did once tell me that here are the 4 virtues of being emperor. And I did notice I did not have any of those virtues, so I guess I kind of saw this coming. Oh, speaking of which, I have the 4 virtues of being a podcast host. I want to send those to you later. I also love Commodus listing his own virtues. He's like, I have my own virtues. Courage. Perhaps not on the battlefield, but there are many forms of courage.
He didn't give any examples.
So, true. Do you know when you watch a movie you've seen so many times before, but you keep hoping it's going to work out differently? Like, I felt that so much during this movie, where when Marcus Aurelius and Commodus are having this scene, and then Marcus Aurelius says that line of, your failures as a son are my failures as a father. I'm like, no, why would you say that? Like, there must have been a better line you could have used.
Yeah, there's no encouragement of like, maybe we could slot you into Maximus's cabinet, It's just, you completely failed. You're not good. I will say, so in terms of humanizing the character, even though he does something terrible here by killing his own father, this is probably one of the scenes where he seemed most human to me. Mainly because Joaquin Phoenix, I think, did a great job. In the way he starts crying and saying how hard he tried to please his father, but never got a full hug. He got like half hugs, never got one word of praise. And I believe him. Like, I actually think that Marcus was not a good father to him. And maybe it was impossible. Maybe you can't be emperor of Rome and be a great father unless your child just happens to be, by luck, one of the good ones. Like Lucilla, she tries to do the right thing. It seems she is trying to be a good moral person, and it just seems that Commodus wasn't. And the Roman emperor is not somebody that has the time to invest in correcting that. So I never quite feel like I'm on Commodus's side, but a scene like this does really humanize him. And like I said earlier, it avoids that pitfall of the villain turning into a cartoon character.
The other thing is, just that line is sick. I would butcher the whole world if you would only love me.
Again, till the end, not understanding at all what his father wants. I could have killed everyone if you...
Also, he just said he had no courage on the battlefield. So literally, he would not be the one doing the butchering. He would have someone else.
Once it was time for the butchering, he'd be like, okay, I got this. Maximus? Hey, Maximus? I
need you to butcher the world for me.
Maximus is woken by Quintus, who brings him to see Commodus and the dead Marcus Aurelius.
It's
Commodus
actually,
says,
that moment is executed so great. He's like, the emperor would like to see you. Cut to Joaquin Phoenix, because Maximus thinks he's going to see Marcus Aurelius.
Commodus says that Marcus died in his sleep. He then asks for Maximus's loyalty, for him to take his hand, but Maximus storms out. And Lucilla immediately sort of sees what's going on and slaps Commodus and then kisses his hand.
This is set up a little bit earlier. I think when Lucilla tells him he's a bad liar, which I think is sort of a blanket term for Maximus does not know how to do politics. I think a smart person would have played along with Commodus at this point. If he had done that, it could have spared the attempted execution on his life and the actual execution on his family. It's complicated, though, because in the moment, it's so satisfying to watch Commodus, or to watch Maximus refuse to take his hand. Like, screw you. Just walks out of the room. But Not the best move.
I was gonna say the same thing, basically, that, in the moment, just pretend you're with him, and then like scheme behind the scenes. But that is a good point, that even if he did say, yeah, sure, he would not have believed them and probably would have gone after Maximus anyway. So,
And
very good
talk
point.
about the naivete of Maximus. When he returns to his tent, he tells Cicero that he needs to go get those two senators immediately. He needs their counsel. And it's like, these are just two senators you just met. These are the only two people you can rely on for counsel. Well, I guess they're representatives of the Senate.
Yeah, but literally, I mean, they set it up earlier where literally he has no one else. Like, they are literally the only two that he met that expressed doubt about Commodus's vision. So, I mean, who else is he going to go to?
Right after Cicero and Maximus speak, Cicero departs, and then Quintus arrives. And he tells Maximus that his refusal of Commodus's hand was not prudent. Prudent. The emperor has been slain. Quintus goes along with Commodus's line, however, and says that he died of natural causes. Praetorian guards then rush in and seize Maximus. Quintus orders his execution and tells Maximus that his family will meet him in the afterlife too.
That seemed like overkill. Why'd they have to kill them?
Daniel?
Yeah, Daniel.
Well, really not cool. This scene just infuriating. But no, he had good. Commodus. Look, Commodus and Maximus are the same. They each take life when they need to.
Well,
What's
is
the
there
difference?
is there a logistical reason for killing his family, like to avoid any kind of retribution,
Maybe
or is
his
it
son growing up and getting revenge?
Right, or is it like an honor thing where you don't just kill the usurper, you kill their entire family
and
as
their
sort
bloodline?
Yeah, because the son could then lay a claim to the throne and stuff, and the mother could be, regent for her son and stuff.
Right, and it tells everybody else, like, hey, if you move against the emperor, even if you're willing to die, you're still not going to want to do it because it's not just you; it's your whole family that's going down.
And the other farmers that were there.
All right, they bring Maximus out to the woods and they prepare to execute him. He asks for a soldier's death. So the executor, not the executor, whatever, the executioner gets closer behind Maximus, but he uses this as an opportunity to attack. He kills all the soldiers, but is wounded severely. And actually, there's one moment where a soldier's about to pull out his sword, but it won't come out. Alun, what does Maximus say?
The frost, sometimes it makes the blade stick.
Sick line.
I used to think
Maximus...
it was cold, but it's the frost.
Maximus rushes home, but he is too late. He finds his wife and son dead and crucified, and his farm burned. And the slaves dead as well.
Alun, this is the moment you were talking about with the shot of the moon, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of surrealism here. And I think part of what Ridley Scott talked about is this would be like a 3 to 4 week trip to get from where he was about to be executed and get all the way back to his home to find his family. And so how do you compress all of that? And so he opted for surrealism, doing these interesting shots. Now, a shot of the moon, you can see the moon in the night sky, but the amount of detail you see, it feels so out of place in this movie. And I think this movie, it generally uses that surrealism when he's on the brink of death. So when he gets picked up here, there's a shot where you see him kind of floating above the ground, and it looks very strange. And then it turns out he's on a wagon, and so there's a reason he's floating above the ground, but it wouldn't look as kind of odd as it did in that shot.
Yeah.
When you see him put his hand on the ground and kind of grab some rocks, that's sort of him saying, like, I've got one foot in heaven, but I'm not ready to go to the afterlife yet. He regrounds himself and he stays in our reality.
Yeah. I mean, I think they did that effect where his head's like moving along the ground at the end too, even though he was not moving at that point.
Right.
He was being carried away.
But that doesn't matter.
It might have started
I
before. Yeah, I don't remember.
Before, but
this isn't a complaint about the movie, but it's my criticism of Maximus. It's frustrating how honorably he fights. So there's one point in the scene where one of the Praetorian guards doesn't even notice what's going on. He's killed all of his friends, and the guy's just sitting on his horse looking away. And instead of like sneaking up behind him and killing him, Maximus yells Praetorian, and then the guy charges at him. And Maximus gets wounded in this altercation. And then like Maximus fails to get to his family on time. And it's like one wonders if he fought a little less honorably and got a little less wounded, would he have made it on time?
I feel like it's implied that his family was killed significantly before he got there. That's just my assumption. Like, even if he dealt with that faster and didn't get wounded, I have a hard time believing he would have gotten there in time.
I think it's a reasonable assumption.
And also, when you're watching it, like, and you're not watching it through the lens of trying to pick it apart, and he yells, Praetorian, aren't you like, yes, I love this guy.
I thought it was
He's
awesome.
got principles, and he lives by them.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the reaction. But then it's, okay, I guess I'm picking apart. But it's like, I look back and I'm like, like.
No, it's a good point.
Maybe
I mean, he literally would not have gotten that really bad injury if he didn't do that.
Yeah, right? No, I think it's right in line with what we said earlier about he should have taken Commodus's hand and played along. But I don't think it's right to say he's a bad liar. It's more, I mean, actually, he says it himself. I never developed your comfort for it. He has no comfort with lying. Yeah. He does have these rules of honor that he's going to live by. And so you could say this is another moment where he probably shouldn't have done that. That wound could have killed him.
Maximus is enslaved. He's lying, dying in front of his wife and son, but he's picked up by a group of slavers. Fellow slave Juba from Numidia tends to his wounds. We meet Proximo, a slave owner who trains gladiators. He purchases the slaves, including Maximus and Juba and some of the others. And because of Maximus's SPQR tattoo, they assume he's a deserter.
Proximo should get a prequel when he was a gladiator.
Yeah.
I like him.
Yeah, he's a great character in the movie. He Oliver Reed, I believe, died during filming, who played Proximo. Oh. And so they actually had to, I mean, this is another one where anybody who's like a big fan of this movie has probably seen a lot of these pieces of trivia, but they finished his role by taking earlier scenes with him and sort of inserting him in, and were able to make it work in the movie. But he is such a great character, and he has such a theatrical way of delivering all of his lines, and he gets some great ones. And I love how often he pounds the idea, I am Proximo. I shall be closer to you for the next few days, which will be the last of your miserable lives. When you die, and die you shall, your transition shall be to the sound of... And I'm doing it extra loud so it gets picked up over the noise cancellation. He is just such a charming character who's just constantly delivering terrible news.
Yeah, I mean, he even had them say, "We who are about to die salute you."
That's right.
Yeah, he really wants them to know they're gonna die.
But when he's giving his speech and kind of hits that "you're gonna die" button again, right before their first gladiator match, he tells them, ultimately, we're all dead men. Sadly, we cannot choose how, but we can decide how we meet that end in order that we are remembered as men. And at that moment, you actually see Maximus look up, and he's taking that in, and it seems to resonate with him. So, Daniel, I know I'm getting ahead a little bit, so I'll stop myself in a second. But when they're going through each of the gladiators, show me what you're made of, and they each take turns fighting Proximus' swordsman. Maximus refuses to fight him, and he's not really willing to fight in these games. He was a soldier that had to kill people for real reasons, not for sport or entertainment. But I think when he hears this, he decides, yeah, if I'm going to die, I'm going to choose how, and I'm not going to just lie there, if that's what you're thinking.
Before we move on, quick fun fact, SPQR means Senatus Populusque Romanus. Probably bad pronunciation, but it's the Senate and the people of Rome, which is a common acronym. You would see it on like, what do you call the things that the Ninja Turtles come out of? Manholes? You would see it written on like manholes in Rome and stuff. But a legionary's tattoo probably wouldn't say that. What I read is it would say like Legio or something like that, which means legion. So, yeah, Gil was just talking about that scene where they're all fighting. Maximus refuses to fight. Later, we see Maximus scraping off that SPQR tattoo very painfully.
Yeah, you gotta go
Juba
deep
asks,
to get a tattoo off. It's like way under the skin. It
looks rough.
Yeah.
And Juba asks, "Is that a sign of your gods?" And Maximus kind of like smiles, and he asks, "Will that not anger them?" I have to say, like, forsaken, depressed Maximus is an awesome Maximus. I like it a lot.
He is so badass, Maximus. I just need to point that out. It's like one of the things, like, okay, yeah, maybe it's not a ton of depth or whatever, but you cannot undervalue. It's just so satisfying to watch Maximus do anything. Like when they tell him to fight and he refuses, it's not like he's like, I'm not going to fight. He picks up his sword like this. I don't know why he picks it up like that. And he kind of like flicks it away as if to say, like, this is what I think of your little games. And then when he's scraping off the tattoo, like he's barely showing the pain. He's like, and you know it hurts, but he's like, I can't let this Juba guy see me in pain. I want to look cool. And it reminds me of John Wick. There's these little moments where he's fun to watch. In John Wick Chapter 2, a guy calls him to basically say, I need to get revenge on you. I'm going to send some people to kill you. And before he can even finish the sentence, John just hangs up. It's that resignation and that stoicism of, I know it's coming. I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to do what needs to get done. I'm not going to complain about it.
When it comes to the colors, I assumed red meant you're one of the best fighters there. Is that how you interpreted it?
I don't remember the colors.
They put like red, yellow, and like Proximo was like saying what color he wanted to assign to each gladiator. Oh yeah, I was just wondering because they ended up putting Maximus with the reds, even though he didn't even fight. So
they must have seen something in him. And yeah, I figure. So I pulled up the script here.
Yeah,
and I see Proximo says red. Juba looks at Hagen with honor at having one red. So clearly he was proud to be selected for red. Oh, and also, Daniel, slight correction. You said Juba heals his wound. I don't think that's right. Juba tells him they will clean your wound.
He says that, but then in the very next scene, we see him shoving stuff into Maximus's wound.
Well,
okay.
Speaking of which, I want to. Did you know that first? That's called maggot debridement therapy, and it was real. And actually, the maggots will eat the dead tissue and not touch the healthy tissue.
Oh, he was referring to the maggots. They will clean your wound.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Okay, yeah, I knew that. That's funny.
That's so funny.
Yeah, and then I think
didn't
he
realize
put
they were
some
maggots.
stuff. Yeah, and I think he put stuff on top of it to keep them under there so they don't like leave.
So they do that in Game of Thrones too, or maybe it's House of the Dragon. Yeah.
House of the Dragon with Viserys.
Yeah.
Good catch, Alon.
It's a real thing. I ChatGPT'd it.
I was going to say, good catch, Alon. I know he asked ChatGPT.
Well, I asked it. You guys didn't ask.
Yeah, I didn't ask ChatGPT.
When I first saw the movie, I'm like, no way the maggots are going to make it better. Like, this guy's crazy. But this time I'm like, you know what? I'll be open-minded. Just like his wound was open.
Nice.
Oh, and that explains why Maximus was going to like pick at it too, because there's like maggots in his wound.
Right.
They enter the arena for their first battle. Proximo gives a motivating speech that you guys referenced, and the gladiators enter the arena. Maximus is chained to Juba. They're each like chained to each other, and they win the battle to a very cheering crowd.
Yeah, I got to say the crowd, they really make you hate the crowd in this movie because again, you have to look at the first line because that's the first impression. The first thing we hear from them. So they're not, before they go out into the stadium, you just hear them chanting, kill, kill, kill. They really paint the mob as they paint the crowd as just a bloodthirsty mob.
Man, I feel bad for the squire guy or scribe who speaks 7 languages that pissed himself and died instantly.
The amount of work it takes to learn 7 languages.
Yeah.
And then just for it to be wasted.
I mean, yeah, he didn't even get a chance to scream in 7 languages.
Just like imagine walking into an arena where you were about to fight to the death. That was one thing I kept thinking during this movie. And like,
I mean, when you're in that position though, you don't have a choice. I mean, something would probably take over you, fight or flight.
I agree with your point that if I had been in Maximus's army, because I would have been one of those people, I would have been super brave and excited.
Yeah, you're assuming you would just be dropped in there now with your current like brain and everything.
I was already on the run 6 weeks ago at the Elysium speech. Daniel's like, he was joking about that. I'm like, I don't care.
That was played for laughs. Come on.
I'm gonna make an NPC joke here. Uh, when my favorite part is when he walked out into the arena and was like, "It's gladiating time."
Nice.
So
Sorry for
everyone does
laughing
that
at
now for
that.
every movie. Yeah.
Commodus marches into Rome. It doesn't really march, actually. He's on a chariot. Anyway, epic scene of Commodus entering Rome in front of the Colosseum, because everything in Rome is in front of the Colosseum. And the crowd hates him. They yell things like, "Usurper, go away." And then Commodus goes to his first session of the Senate, and he's bored. He says the problem with Marcus Aurelius was he spent too much time studying. We all knew that. Late nights, reading, writing, boring. Commodus has his own ideas. He wants to rule as a father to his people with love. He wants to hold them to his bosom or something like that and take care of them. Senator
He
Gracchus
did say
mocks
that.
Commodus. Did he say bosom? I was like, I wasn't
Yeah,
sure. I
he
was making
did.
this
He
up.
did.
The word bosom was said once in the movie, and it was in that moment.
Senator Gracchus mocks Commodus, saying, have you tried holding somebody with plague up to your bosom? And Commodus threatens him. Lucilla intervenes and handles Commodus with light.
Yeah, I think there's a theme in this movie, which is that the emperor has power ostensibly, but in reality, they are ruling at the behest of the people. And we see them some very stark moments of that later on, but you at least see a hint of it here where he's walking in. Oh, sorry, no, he's being carried in on the chariot or whatever. Very regal. But like you said, the crowd is yelling at him, "Usurper." And Commodus understands that to an extent. I mean, his sister mentions the Senate and he calls it an illusion, like let the people have their illusions to keep them pacified. But I think he understands to some extent he needs the people's favor, but I don't know if he values that enough and sees just how important it is.
Well, that's his whole strategy. So we get to that in the next scene. Sorry, Ellen, were you going to say something about it?
No, I was just gonna say I do feel like Commodus recognizes that he needs the people's respect and loyalty before he can make any serious moves. Like he doesn't. I mean, the whole movie, he doesn't want to just kill Maximus because the people love him, and so he can't just dissolve the Senate without having the people's back. I think.
Yeah, I guess I should correct myself. I think he appreciates it, but he overestimates how good he is at winning their respect.
Yeah,
because pretty soon there's a moment where he even says like, "It's been long enough. I can dissolve the Senate now, right?" And I'm like, wow, he just has no barometer on where they're at right now. So he definitely gets it. But
his sister just like, go to sleep or something.
Well,
yeah.
I actually am not sure how we're supposed to interpret that. So, okay, the next scene, which is where Commodus basically makes his plans. He tells Lucilla he wants to get rid of the Senate. It should just be them two and the people of Rome. And he comes up with a scheme where he's going to give the people a vision of Rome, the greatest vision of their lives, and they're going to love him for it, and they'll forget about the Senate. And we soon learn his plans. It's 150 days of games. But Senator Gracchus says Commodus is clever. Rome is the mob, and he's going to win them over with these games. The beating heart of Rome is the Colosseum. And I do think when he jumps to like, okay, can I get rid of the Senate now? Obviously, he's a little delusional. But I do think we're supposed to kind of believe, until Maximus's arrival, that Commodus's plan is working. Like, he's winning the mob over.
Yeah, he was like throwing them bread and stuff.
Yeah. It does give me a little bit of the House of the Dragon syndrome.
Yeah.
One of our key complaints for season 2 of that show is that the common people of Westeros are a very important element of the storyline, but they feel like a monolith that will just swing from one opinion to another. Like in this movie, where it's the audience has now become aligned with Maximus and they're against the Emperor. And I think that's true to an extent. But when it's that blatant, it comes off as satirical, and it kind of only works comedically. And it's like, I wish that there was a way, and I know it's tough because this movie's already 2.5 hours. It made me want to see a version of this story. Oh, and you even said when we were watching Gladiator 2, you were like, I wish this was a miniseries.
I mean, I wish any movie I loved was a miniseries. Just got one more of it. But yeah, I mean, they don't show anything to do with the common folk outside of the Colosseum. That's the only time you ever see them, and you hear who do they like right now based on their chants. Like, you never see normal people walking around the city, outside of that.
Yeah,
Really.
it made me really want to see a story that is from the perspective of an everyday person and attempts to paint an accurate picture. Because, of course, anytime we tell a story about Rome, it's got to be an epic, right?
Mhm.
So it's got to involve these larger than life characters. But it really made me want to see, like, it would be cool. I saw a Reddit post on the Ask a Historian subreddit where they were like, okay, I'm a normal person living in Rome and I want to go see a gladiator match. How do I do it? Like, how do I get a ticket? How do I even know what time it's going to be happening and what
That's
day?
funny.
And I was like, this is fascinating to read about. And we don't know all the answers to that. A lot of it you just sort of piece together based on the evidence you can find.
So this whole idea of Commodus wanting to get rid of the Senate, right? So there's some interesting context here, which is that there's a period of Roman history we can refer to as like the Principate, which is what followed the Republic. And this is the period started by Augustus Caesar where the Senate is an illusion, right? Like you sort of pretend that the Senate has power, but really the emperor rules. But the point is, look, the nobility, like there's a lot of people. It's not, I don't know if it's really the mob. It's more like there's nobles and people who matter, and you need to make them feel important. Commodus is basically the last person to rule under the Principate. Following him, I forget which dynasty starts this, but we have like the Dominate, which is where the emperor really, it is just the emperor alone who rules. We kind of do away with the whole fiction of the Senate. And eventually, we actually get to this idea of divine rule, where the emperor isn't just the first citizen, which is what princeps means, but rather like actually God on earth. And so you could see like Commodus is sort of ahead of his time in that sense. Like he wants to jump ahead to where the emperor is a god.
That's interesting because Maximus's tattoo, the guy was like, "Is that your god?" Huh? And that's Rome.
I don't know if you guys know, but they were talking about making a Gladiator II where he was actually going to be working for the gods.
Yeah.
The more we talk about it, the more I'm like, that's a great idea.
It would be cool.
We have our next battle. Maximus has another battle, and he wins. This time he puts on an especially good show, where he's got this sick thing where he like cuts off somebody's head with two swords. And he then throws his sword into the crowd at a table. Don't worry, he didn't risk hurting anybody. And he yells, "Are you not entertained?" After the battle, Proximo meets with Maximus. He tells him that they're going to Rome to participate in Commodus's games. Proximo was once a gladiator himself, a very successful one, and he was granted his freedom by Marcus Aurelius himself. Maximus tells Proximo that he too wishes to stand in front of the emperor one day, as Proximo did, and Maximus commits to winning over the crowd.
Proximo explains to him it's not good enough to just kill and be good at being a gladiator. An important element is winning over the crowd, putting on a good show. I love the moment where Proximo says, Marcus Aurelius touched me on my shoulder and gave me my freedom. And Maximus, he's like, you knew Marcus Aurelius? I didn't say I knew him. I said he touched me on the shoulder once. It's a great moment where it's like the first time we've seen Maximus smile in like an hour and 15 minutes. And also just love Proximo. He really is a great character.
So I love Proximo so much. He ends the scene with the sickest line. "So, Spaniard, we shall go to Rome together and have bloody adventures, and the great whore will suckle us until we are fat and happy and can suckle no more. And then, when enough men have died, perhaps you will have your freedom."
Yeah. And then he looks outside and goes like this. He's just taking it all in.
So good. Is this the part where Proximo gives him his armor?
Yes.
So that confused me, actually, because later Lucius comes up to Maximus and he asks about his armor. And Maximus points at a couple of horses that decorate the body armor. And he's like, this is Argento. And this is, I forget the other name. But they didn't put it in the movie. Maximus decorated the armor with his own silver designs.
Yes, I was also confused by it and also looked it up and what you just said.
I didn't look it up. That was on the commentary.
Oh, okay.
I was confused for a second, and I was just like, oh, like he's just like making it up, whatever. Like maybe Maximus had those horses, and he's like, 2 horses? All right, cool. Like I'm just,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering if it was, and then no, he added them on.
Well, also on the commentary, the two horses' names, if you translate them, one means silver and one means trigger. So silver is a reference to Lone Ranger, like "Hi-yo, Silver, away!" And then trigger was the name of a horse that was used in a lot of westerns. So there's a little reference there. Also, I mean, obviously, are you not entertained? What a great line. And I love that. I mean, that's Maximus spitting in the face of the mob, saying, like, this is what you want, right? You want to see me cut people's heads off and stuff? You bunch of sickos? And I think the sarcasm is lost on the mob because they're just like, yeah.
They enter Rome. Maximus and Juba discuss their families. Juba's family is still alive, but he doesn't think he'll ever see them again. TBD if that'll happen. We'll discuss later. But Maximus's family is already in the afterlife. They arrive at the Colosseum, and they're amazed by it. Juba says, I didn't know men could build such things.
When Juba says to Maximus, you will meet them again, but not yet. I like the way Maximus says, not yet, not yet. He says it twice.
I like that too.
Any problem with that? But there's little moments that are sprinkled throughout the movie. Go ahead.
No, I think the movie's so good. I think almost every scene has some line that lands just like so well.
There's a few moments where it is just that I know I'm like really picking on this little detail, but there are a few moments where Maximus will say something, and then the last thing he says it a second time. And it feels really natural.
He did say, are you not entertained twice?
What's that?
He said twice in a row, are you not entertained?
Yeah, he does it a few times. Yeah, it's interesting.
Commodus creepily stares at a sleeping Lucius. Lucilla fears for him. Commodus tells her that he thinks it might be time to finally dissolve the Senate. We've had, a week or two of games? She tells him to rest. He asks her to stay with him. He's still afraid of the dark. He asks for a kiss, and she kisses him on the forehead. He's disappointed.
Yeah, I don't know if we've mentioned yet about this incestuous...
Yeah, did you notice? I feel like there's something weird in the relationship.
Yeah, I don't know if in case listeners can't detect the sarcasm in Daniel's voice, but yeah, Commodus clearly wants a more intimate relationship with his sister. I don't know again if it's because we recently watched House of the Dragon, but this felt very similar to me between where Daemon in that show really wanted the respect of his brother Viserys. And when he couldn't get that respect, it's like he set his sights instead on his brother's daughter, so his own niece. I wonder if there's a similar dynamic at play here, where he never got love from his father. Maybe I can get it from my sister instead.
Yes, because that's the same type of love that he's going for.
It's not the same type, but I don't think Commodus is all that well adjusted. And he also knows that she did have the respect of her father. So for him, if I can get her to submit to me, then it's like it's by proxy, I'm getting my father's respect.
And I also think like there was clearly, they've clearly, I think they're close to some extent, right? And a lot of it is like Lucilla playing along with Commodus, but you got to think it's been 20, 30 years or whatever. And she's kind of the only one that knows how to deal with Commodus. And so, Commodus feels a very strong attachment to her, right? And he says a lot of times that it's basically just the two of them, right? Like she's the only one that treats him with care and stuff, right? Like his world is very small, right? He doesn't have anybody else that he's like looking to for comfort.
Yeah, and I think she understands where he's coming from and how he grew into who he is. She's seen him since he was a child. And so as much as she's playing along, I do think there's a part of her that's also genuinely taking care of him. We even saw earlier in the movie when Marcus told her Commodus is going to need you, because he knew that when he turns over rule to Maximus, Commodus is going to need Lucilla to comfort him and to be the shoulder that he can cry on.
Before our first battle in Rome, Proximo is upset because their first battle, they're assigned to be the Carthaginians in the Battle of Carthage, which was a massacre of the Carthaginians. And he doesn't want his gladiators to all get killed in the very first round. And as Maximus awaits this battle, young Lucius comes to meet him, neither of them realizing who the other is. At the end of the conversation, Maximus realizes, oh, this is Lucilla's son and the emperor's nephew. And he's concerned. He kind of looks around and he wonders, does Commodus know that he's here?
Yeah, and not even a little bit of a, maybe you're my son based on the timing. Not at all. Not even a hint.
And this is where he tells him about the horses.
Yeah, the Sargento and...
Argento. I forget the other.
All right, the Battle of Carthage. Maximus and the other gladiators face an overwhelming force of chariot archers, but he rallies them to fight together. They have a sick formation, and they win the battle. Even better, the crowd is entertained. Commodus asks to meet with Maximus, known to him as the Spaniard at this point. The Praetorians march into the arena. They surround the gladiators. Maximus picks up an arrow fragment, intending potentially to use it to assassinate Commodus. But he stops himself when Lucius runs up to Commodus' side. Commodus asks Maximus to remove his helmet and tell him his name, but at first he refuses, declaring his name as Gladiator. But then finally Maximus responds, and Alun, what does Maximus say?
Hold on. At first he says my name is Gladiator.
Right, he
Did you
mentioned
already
that
say that
part.
part?
Yes.
Okay. You guys, all right, hold on. I'm on the spot here. Commander of the armies to the north. General of the
Whoa.
Start from the beginning. What's
my
the first
name-
My
thing
name
he
is
says?
Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies to the north, general of the Felix Legion, loyal servant to true Emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next. Sorry,
Boom.
man, it's just it was a lot of pressure there.
I have to say, the whole time I was describing this scene, I felt like Alun was waiting to interrupt. I kept looking, and I was like, oh, he's ready with the speech.
I'll tell you this. Apparently, like for years, I always messed up that first word. I think I messed up commander. I think I used to say something different.
Probably
So-
general.
Yeah, it's commander of the armies to the north, general of the Felix Legion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, throughout, for the last 20 years, Alun's been reciting that line, quoting this movie. And I have such guilt over this moment where after college, Alun and I both went to Europe. We went to Rome. We went to the Colosseum. And Alun wanted to stand in front of the Colosseum and get filmed reciting that line. So I was holding the camera, and this is why I feel guilty about it. Number one, I could tell Alun felt self-conscious because the group
Just
is
like
waiting.
right now.
Right. The group is waiting for us, and like we separated ourselves to record this little video. And instead of encouraging Alun, I also felt self-conscious, and I just didn't have it in me. So I think I was sort of subtly rushing him, and so the video is very rushed. Like you said it really fast.
Yeah.
I don't even know where the video is. We
I
have.
think we used like an actual like camera, like in the
If
old
we
days.
can find it, we need to put it in the credits.
It was probably that Sony device, that little silver camera.
Yeah, there's no shot we'll find it, but
Yeah.
it was recorded on a digital camera with internal storage or an SD card or something. But to be fair, it wasn't because I didn't want to encourage you. I was really anxious.
That's fair.
And I was
Listen,
stressed
we'll
out
go,
too.
We'll
I
go back.
was in
We'll
this-
do it. We'll do it one day.
What I think I'll do is just when you recite it in this podcast, I'll make it look like you're in I'll put your face over Maximus's.
All right, that works.
And that'll be the retribution.
By the way, in my notes, I put in bold. Alun, you want to give the speech? Because I did not want to steal your thunder.
Yeah, and to be clear, Alun did that from memory. Okay.
Yeah,
It wasn't
there's
like,
no
yeah,
notes
written
here.
down.
He did look down, but I assume it was just to focus.
It was to focus, and then I tried to like look around to make it clear I'm not looking at something specific.
That's why his eyes were rolling around like crazy. My name is Maximus Decimus.
I have an actual thing to say about this scene. Okay, so the arrowhead that he was holding there, when he turned around and said, "My name is Gladiator," and turned his back to Commodus, he was still holding it. And you can clearly see it, and nobody reacts to it. That's weird. And then he went to take his helmet off, and you could still see it. He's still holding it there. Don't you think, like, someone would have said something or done something,
Yeah, I'm
reacted in
sure
some way.
someone in the crowd noticed it. And can you imagine being the person, be like, dude, did you see that? I think we're about to see something crazy.
Yeah.
I'm
But I
willing
felt
to
like-
but you
Yeah,
can
sorry.
forgive it regardless, because very quickly we go from this to him, I mean, just blatantly, disobeying the emperor in front of everybody, and he's sort of allowed to get away with it. So I don't even know if it would matter if
I
they
mean,
saw him with a weapon.
But I'm saying the soldiers, like protecting Commodus, like no reaction to Maximus obviously holding a concealed weapon there.
They probably want him to die.
Yeah, that might be true. And Commodus might be too dumb to notice.
Yeah, that I definitely buy.
Yeah.
I love when you have a battle and the odds are against them, but they win. And there's a reason they win, other than just, I'm so good at this. But they're not used to having, I assume, a general of Maximus's stature as a gladiator. And so he's somebody who gets in there and has actual tactics. And so he rallies the other gladiators around him, who I assume don't usually coordinate as well as they do here. And that's what wins them the battle. And it's always refreshing when somebody underestimates someone and then they turn out to be way more capable than you thought.
Yeah.
So that's been the theme of this movie so far, but this is the best example of it so far.
And like in the battle, you can see literally the people that weren't following his orders correctly were the ones that died. Like he would say like, form staggered columns, form single column, hold as one. The people that were outside the formation were the ones that died.
It's so funny. You actually see a few of these in my notes. I just wrote these idiots who are just standing outside the formation.
Yeah.
They're literally, you see them. There's a few, like, they're not drone shots, but it's like a drone shot, like above.
Yeah.
And you just see this idiot standing there in the middle of nowhere, like, oh, where do I go?
Yeah.
Other thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, the other thing in this scene, another Alun call out. There are two things in this scene that I know Alun loves. So one is where where the gladiators do some cool move, and Commodus goes, ooh,
Yeah.
like he has a reaction.
He has like 3 awesome reactions.
The second I have is where he sticks his tongue out at some violence. He goes like,
that's like a
I don't know what the third
classic
was.
scene from the movie right there. The first one you said was this, ooh, right? I think the third one was a more tame one. It wasn't as memorable because I don't remember it either.
And then we actually didn't talk about just what happens at the end of the scene. After Maximus's speech, Commodus wants his Praetorian Guard to execute Maximus. He has them like take their weapons out, but the crowd chants to let him live. And this is the moment, right, where Maximus has won the crowd. He's become more powerful than the emperor. And we have this great moment of Commodus tries to shush the crowd. He literally he tries for a split second and then he gives up. And he's forced to let Maximus live.
Ruling at the behest of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an NPC fun fact. Did you know in ancient Rome, thumbs up meant to kill him and thumbs down meant to let him live?
Huh.
I don't even know if that's true, but I've heard that a million times.
So we know that, but we don't know how people got tickets to get into Coliseum.
Well, we know bits and pieces about that. But I mean, this moment here is an example of why this movie is so awesome. I don't even know. I keep feeling like I have to defend the movie. It's not like it was universally panned. I mean, I think it has an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it definitely has its critics. But a moment like this is so powerful because it takes so long to get here, because you need the first 30 to 40 minutes of meditating on the awfulness of having to fight war. I just want to go home to my family. Then you rip that away from him, and now you need to spend almost an hour of him moving up from the bottom rung of the gladiator world and just seething with, I want to get a face-to-face with the emperor. And then finally, you get to this moment, what's your name? And his response, is so good. And it couldn't have been that good unless you were able to sustain our attention for all this time waiting for the inevitable, because eventually they have to meet. It's coming, but they have to keep us interested all that time, build the tension, and then, my name is Maximus, you f***ing piece of I'm going to bleep all that, so I think it'll sound funny.
That was the director's cut.
Also, we should mention, before his fights, Maximus picks up the dirt, and he'll even smell it. So some people interpret that as it's almost like when you go to the gym, you put chalk on your hands, so it'll help him get a better grip on his sword. Even if that's true, the sniffing of the dirt, there's clearly something more meaningful there to him. Works on a farm, has a connection to the earth.
I would say, I mean, this is my own interpretation. I don't think it's about better grip or anything like that. I think it's literally just grounding himself in the moment and like, it's like something tangible to make you like make your body aware of where you are and like just puts you in the moment. I think it's something
I like
more
that.
like that. Thanks.
Oh, and before going back to even before they get to the Colosseum, there's a kind of funny moment where you can see the gladiators and Maximus especially are sort of treated like celebrities, and they kind of get swarmed, like girls are trying to kiss him.
That
and he's
same
just
girl,
annoyed.
you see her twice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when later in the movie when Cicero is following him in the crowd, she was right next to him and again trying to like get next to Maximus.
Yeah, I love his Maximus's, what's the word I'm looking for? Not contempt for the crowd. I think he really hates them and the way they revel in this violence. And just seeing him annoyed at them was satisfying.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we're part of that crowd. And Maximus is annoyed at us because we all want to just kiss him.
Well, also, I guess it's a reminder like of what he fought for. Like he fought for Rome so they could live this lifestyle that he disagrees with. He just wants to get the hell out of there, live on his farm.
And we're back. So people love the old format, or they love the new format with Penguin, Daniel, that we introduced. This exciting new idea where we record 75% of a podcast, and then we stop. We take a day off and we come back.
And it's been fun where I have to recap the first half of the movie without having seen the end of the movie. All my whole life, I've avoided seeing the end of Gladiator. All right, let's start from the top.
I'm gonna leave it in because we literally, this is the second time we've tried to start the podcast, and you tried that joke the first time. It didn't really land. I tried a joke that didn't land. So like I was using this second chance to clean up my act, but you just went for it again. So we're gonna leave it in.
Well, do you think we could splice in my joke from the first one? Because I feel like I did a better job. I feel like I did a better job in the first take.
The whole reason we started over is because we did this thing again where we hit a speed bump and then we all start analyzing. Well, we should, and then we just get stuck. So for Penguin, we waited a day and then started recording, and that was great. So this time we even upped the ante further. It's been days since we stopped recording in the middle of talking about Gladiator, and a lot's happened in that time. Daniel's seen Gladiator 2, or Gladiator, as it's revealed in the actual theater. I can't believe they didn't use that in the trailers or anything, where you replace the I with two eyes. Replace the I with two eyes, which means two in Times New Roman. And Times New Roman. What is it? Roman numerals.
It is Roman.
I'm just so flat. I'm just so
I feel like a lot of movies actually have a different logo in the actual movie than in all the promotional material. That's a common tactic, actually.
Yeah, I can't think of any other.
Start paying attention to it.
Okay, I will. Thank you. Just like with Penguin, stopping in the middle has given us an opportunity to listen back to everything we've recorded so far. We now have an unusual opportunity to course correct our episode. But I think, Alon, you and I were talking behind Daniel's back, and we agreed that he's doing a great job so far.
Yeah. we agreed to say that.
Yeah.
The One Take podcast has shifted to a scripted show.
Well, that was the one joke we decided to keep because I thought it worked okay. Well, yeah, Daniel, you're doing a great job. I'm going to hand you back the reins and go.
No more jokes. Continue from where we left off. Go.
If you recall from a few minutes ago, Maximus was just saved in the arena. He gave his epic speech, and Commodus wanted to execute him because he's the general that he left for dead and all this stuff, or tried to kill. But the crowd chants for Maximus. Commodus can't kill him. Maximus is too much of a hero. And so right after that, we see Commodus and Lucilla talking, and Lucilla's upset because she just found out. She didn't know that Commodus had tried to kill Maximus and all this stuff had transpired. And Commodus defends it. He says to her, look, I had to do it. I had to protect the Empire. And we all know that Commodus, of course, only had the best of intentions. But Commodus is very upset. His soldiers lied to him. He thought Maximus was executed successfully. And Lucilla pretends to sort of be on Commodus' side and comforts him.
I do wonder how they were able to get away with lying and saying Maximus died, because Maximus killed a lot of them.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe it's just goes to show how bad Commodus is at this job, where he doesn't know any of these soldiers. So when he sends 10 and 2 come back, he's not like, where are the eight other guys?
Also,
he's so detached from all of it.
Yeah. Also, Quintus told Commodus he also didn't know, which I question. Like Quintus, I mean, he's the one commanding these soldiers directly. So it's also strange. Like, did he lie to Commodus about not knowing, or did he truly not know either? And he's also incompetent.
Yeah, you got to think it's a combination of Commodus being incompetent, plus maybe a lot of these soldiers really are just peons and people aren't paying as much attention to them as they should. Plus, a lot of these people, you don't want to be the messenger of bad news with Commodus, I assume. So we get home. Let's just say we killed him.
I think that's basically right. I think it's easy to lie to Commodus about something like this. He's not going to notice some soldiers that died. But there's no way Quintus didn't know. Lucilla secretly goes to see Maximus, or as I wrote in my notes, secretly goes to see Commodus. I mixed up a lot of names throughout these notes, and it's very confusing.
No, you're doing a great job.
How does Lucilla go to see Maximus? Well, it turns out that a lot of noble women would pay good coin for a secret liaison with a champion gladiator. And so she pretends to be such a noble woman. She insists to Maximus that she knew nothing of what Commodus did to him and his family. She confesses to him that she's been living in terror for herself, for her own life and for her son ever since Commodus took over. She asks Maximus to meet with a senator that can oppose Commodus. She tells Maximus that he possesses real power. Today, she saw him become more powerful than the Emperor of Rome. Maximus rejects this and asks her to leave him alone.
In this scene, by the way, I pointed out a few minutes ago, last time we talked, that Maximus has a habit of repeating a phrase in a way that just turns it into like a gut punch. And when he's not sure if he should trust Lucilla or not. And when she claims that she wept, I think she's talking about Maximus's family. You know, I wept for all of you. He's like, as you wept for your father, as you wept for your father. He says it twice in this accusatory tone. And there'll be a few more instances where he says something twice. And it just works for me every time. It's also, this is where the movie starts to, well, I guess a couple things. Daniel, you were talking earlier in the episode about how Maximus is such a heroic figure. Would you consider this an instance where he's not really heroic? Because here he's given an opportunity to do something greater than himself, but all he wants is that revenge. He's not interested in getting involved in this plot to overthrow the empire or really live up to Marcus Aurelius's dying wish.
So I wrote one of my comments on this scene. I love defeated, spiteful Maximus, because I love the Maximus in this scene. Because yes, he's not being heroic. This is a defeated, crushed Maximus who all he cares about is vengeance. He no longer cares about the good of Rome or anything like that. But this is him going through that journey, right? Where eventually he does decide later in the movie to be the hero, right? It's, he's this epic leader at the beginning of the movie and he gets crushed, everything taken from him. And he even loses, right, his values. And this is the story of him regaining those and being a triumphant hero. And I think it's a great story. And this sort of spiteful attitude, at one point he yells to Lucilla when she's telling him about the senator, he yells, then have him kill Commodus. And I love that line. I've always remembered that line.
Yeah, it would also be fair for him to be a little distrustful both of Lucilla and that senator he doesn't really know. Because for all he knows, this is yet more political maneuverings He doesn't know if he's just a pawn in all of this. I mean, that's the sentiment behind let him kill Commodus. So you could also read this in a way that still maintains that view of him as a hero. If he really believed there was a path toward fulfilling Marcus Aurelius's dream, the dream of Rome, if he really believed it was possible, maybe he would embrace it here. And this is not purely an emotional decision of, I don't care about that. I just want to kill Commodus.
All right, it's lunchtime. Maximus is scared to eat his food for fear of being poisoned.
I was like, we're not going to stop again, are we?
And they joke around. The big, strong dude, like that first gladiator they fight. Yeah, the German guy. He takes some of Maximus's food and eats it and then pretends to choke to death. And then they all laugh around. And Juba tells Maximus, you have a great name. He must kill your name before he kills you.
You can't kill that name. The only name better than Maximus is what, Alon?
Max Power.
That's right. There's the right way, the wrong way, and the max power way.
Isn't that the wrong way?
Yes, but faster.
Wait, I remember I was thinking about Max Payne when you were saying
we don't have time for this, Dan. Let's keep moving. I'll put the clip in for everybody. It's from Simpsons.
We're not doing banter anymore? Did the
we
listeners
tried
say they don't like banter?
We tried banter last time. Then this took so long that you had to leave. And so I'm trying to streamline.
Are we on a tight deadline this time?
No, I don't think so. We can banter. It's okay. Yeah, Max Payne. Oh, yeah, let's fill in the banter. Max Payne. Yeah, that was a great game. Remember that game?
I love that game.
Yeah, we used to play that. Yeah. Oh, man. I wish the movie was better. But yeah, Daniel, Max Power, that was a name that Homer got off a hairdryer. He changed his name and then he became awesome. It was a great, really funny episode. Oh, really? I don't really remember that too well. Oh, I remember that. That was a great episode. Thanks, Alon and Daniel. All right.
Wow. Thank you for the banter. All right, we're done with lunch. It's time for the next battle. This is the battle, if you recall, with the Tigers. It's the one with the Tigers. So this battle is arranged between Maximus...
led by Tigris was the guy's name, right? And they say he's like the only undefeated gladiator, something like that.
Oh, yeah, he is the only undefeated gladiator. It did not occur to me that his name has sort of tiger in it.
Yeah, but also, what does undefeated mean?
Like alive? Because Proximo's also alive. Yeah.
So,
like, yes, you can be defeated and not executed.
Yeah, I guess that's what happened when Maximus refused to kill that one dude.
Right.
Which we are about to get to. Maybe we could censor that so Len doesn't give spoilers for 1 minute from now. All right. So, there's going to be a battle between Maximus and this undefeated champion. And Lucilla and Commodus, they sit down to watch this battle. And Lucilla... I'm getting lost in my notes. One second.
Commodus is...
okay. I cut out the Lucilla. It was unnecessary. Basically, Commodus needs a plan to destroy Maximus's name. It turns out he has a plan here. So Maximus is going to fight this gladiator guy, but it's a little rigged. So they got all these tigers being released in each corner. They're intentionally letting go of the tigers at the right moment to hurt Maximus and make him less likely to win the fight. At one point, a tiger grabs onto his back, starts like about to bite into his neck, but Maximus, against all odds, is victorious. He wins the battle.
It felt like a very Commodus idea. I just picture the drawing board for this. I have a foolproof plan to stop Maximus. Okay? Tigers. That's it? Tigers. It can't fail.
So, by the way, so at the beginning of the fight, we know that he sort of arranged it because he says to Lucilla something that basically implies that he's arranged for Maximus's death here. And then I watched the battle and I'm like, I actually rewatched it because I was like, what did he do to arrange victory here? And I think that was it. Is like the Tigers were like unfair.
Yeah, right? I didn't really get it. Initially, I just thought it was... There's just a lot of tigers, and he doesn't stand a chance against them. I didn't pick up on some like rigged component where they're letting them go when they shouldn't, or anything like that.
So they might not. I think they did.
I noticed that too. It looked. I mean, there were 4 tigers, and literally they were let go every time Maximus was right next to one of those holes or whatever exits.
Commodus does not play fair. You know,
Yeah.
he's a lot of things. I didn't think he was also a cheater.
Hey, well, if he was really a cheater, he would have made Maximus fight monkey monsters, CGI monkey
Wait,
monsters.
Were those real creatures?
I
Are
don't
there
know.
monkeys that look like that?
I don't know what the hell those were. I mean, during the movie, I whispered to Len, I was like, what are those things?
They're monkey monsters.
And by the way, if anybody here watches Hack the Movies, I saw Adam Does Movies on his live stream made that same comment saying it looks like he's just fighting monsters in Gladiator 2. But I didn't steal it from him because, Alon, I said that to you in the theater,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I said it yes. But also in the original trailer, I saw them and they looked like
Right.
monkey monsters.
Maximus stands over the defeated gladiator with the mob shouting, "Kill, kill, kill." The mob, like, not very nice, to be honest. I don't know if we were supposed to like the mob or not, but I didn't like them after that. Anyway, they're telling Maximus to kill this guy, and Commodus issues the command to have the gladiator killed in accordance with the mob. But Maximus refuses this order from the emperor. He throws down his weapon, and then the mob shouts out, "Maximus, Maximus the Merciful."
They just blow whichever way.
Yeah.
They go whichever way the wind is blowing. Kill him! I'm not going to kill him. Yeah! Mercy! Is
Commodus-
that a critic? Would you consider that, Daniel, a critique of the movie?
No,
Like, does that
no.
I mean, it seems
No,
like they
that's
just
the
want
point.
whatever Maximus wants.
Yeah.
And they thought Maximus wanted to kill him, and then they saw he didn't. I mean, if Maximus literally shouted, "Screw the emperor, I want to be the emperor," they would probably
Right.
chant for him to be the emperor, which makes, I guess he doesn't need to go behind Commodus's back. He could just announce his intentions in front of the mob and they'll fight for him.
Right?
Yeah,
Maybe.
probably.
Yeah.
Commodus goes out to meet Maximus once
Well,
again.
actually, hold on. I don't want to just to respond to that. That is actually a point that the senator brings up later, where he's like, Maximus, if you take over, so are we just trading essentially one emperor for another? Because Maximus is at the point where he probably could take power. Now, okay, if he just announced it in the Colosseum right then and there, I doubt it would go all that smoothly. But once he has an actual army behind him, he could easily take over Rome at this point.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, I do agree with this idea that, like, yeah, the mob is fickle and he has a lot of influence over them. And, you could argue whether that's, like, realistic or not, but that's clearly the perspective that the movie's taking. And I think it works. So Commodus goes out to meet Maximus once again. They like to have these little chats of theirs inside the arena in front of everybody. And he complains to Maximus, like, he's like, "Come on, you won't die. Like, why won't you die? It's really annoying. I keep asking you to die, and you won't do it." And then
Usually my least favorite scenes in movies. Why won't you die? Like John Wick 4. He shot my ass. This guy just won't die. I thought it
in
worked
this
well here,
movie,
though.
it works. And then, okay, you're not going to believe this. We know Commodus is a lot of things, but he's also a real jerk. He makes fun of Maximus's family. He says a lot of really mean things about the way his wife died and the way his son died. And
Which really undersells what he said. Someone's like, what happened? He said some mean things. I mean, he says some vile things, the worst things he can think of to try and get a reaction out of Maximus. He talks about the noises that his son made while he was being burned alive, the noises that his wife made when other things, terrible things were happening. But I think this is the crux of Maximus's character, partly his stoicism. Right? He will not be moved to fight back, which would give Commodus an excuse to just kill him right then and there. If he attacked the emperor, no matter how fickle this crowd is, no one, I think, could blame him for defending himself or the guards for protecting Commodus. A really satisfying moment. I mean, some of the most satisfying moments in this movie are not when someone's wielding a sword. It's watching people try to get a rise out of Maximus, and he just stands there and doesn't do anything.
And by the way, I don't think it's just about he was trying to trigger violence from Maximus. I think there's also an emotional component here, which is he does want to see weakness from Maximus, right? Like, it's not just that he needs to destroy Maximus's name for the political influence, but he needs to do it personally, right? Like it's still eating at him that his father loved Maximus more than him.
It's Jimmy McGill and Chuck, his brother, Jimmy telling him, get down in the mud and wrestle, get in the mud with me. Like he wants Chuck to insult him and be a jerk the same way Jimmy is to him. For those Sawcast fans out there.
Did Commodus say that his son was nailed to a cross?
Yeah, both of them were crucified.
Seems kind of weird to me because it looked like they were hung.
So we only see their feet. So I think the idea is that they're hanging from crosses.
But don't they usually like nail through the feet or the ankles or leg or something? Like I almost wonder if Commodus was like lying just to make it sound worse or something.
It wouldn't make any sense though, because Maximus saw them.
Well, he doesn't know that.
No, but Maximus made a comment at one point in the movie also about how they crucified his wife and son.
All right.
Yeah.
So I guess they crucified them, and they're like, all right, let's take them off. Let's hang them now.
I don't know that every crucifixion is done in precisely the same way. Maybe their hands were nailed and their feet weren't.
All right.
But you're right that typically you would have a nail in the heel.
Okay.
The Romans, man.
A few more points.
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of bad things this Commodus guy did.
I'm glad.
But Maximus has one response. He says that he has one more life to take.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius. He's like, you already said that. It doesn't really land quite the same way the second time.
Or I thought at this point Maximus launches into some poetry.
That's a second one.
The freestyle. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So before we started recording this episode, I was doing a light amount of research, and I think it sort of colored my commentary of the movie a lot to be in sort of a defensive posture of trying to say, well, I think the movie's good, despite its flaws, even though, it did win 5 Academy Awards, I think. It's generally considered a good movie, but I think I read just a couple of articles of people talking about how bad the movie is. And Daniel, there was that one article where it wasn't even about Gladiator. It was about something else, and it just flippantly mentions Gladiator. I was like, yeah, it's that movie that's got like a muddled plot, and like I guess it won some awards or something. And so it put me on the defense going into this episode. But I was curious, like, what are the critiques of the movie? And I do have a quote here from Roger Ebert. Curious to get your guys' take. He talks about the action. The battle sequences are a pale shadow of the lucidly choreographed swordplay in Rob Roy, 1995. I mean, Rob Roy's a classic. We can all agree on that. I've definitely seen that movie. Instead of moves we can follow and strategy we can appreciate, Scott goes for muddled close-ups of fearsome but indistinct events. The crowd cheers, although those in the cheaper seats are impossible to see because of the murky special effects. That was my number one complaint, is that when I was looking in the crowd and way in the back, I was like, I can't hardly see any details. Like, what color socks is that guy wearing?
I mean, I do think there were a lot of quick cuts. Obviously, like, I am generally a fan where you can see every bit of action, which is what I love about things like John Wick, for instance. But I think this is overly critical. I don't care about the crowd CGI for sure. I don't care about that, especially for a movie from back then.
And I don't really recall it being muddled. Like, I don't feel like I was confused. Like, maybe if I rewatched it, but I don't feel like I was confused about what was happening in the fight, in the battles. Like, I felt like it was very clear what was happening at each point.
Yeah, I do think sometimes I would lose track of precisely where is Maximus. And I definitely think they opted for, like you said, a lot of quick cuts. Mm-hmm. I think it was intentional. They were going for that chaos feeling, which I think especially in the first fight works well because that's what it would feel like. The first time you step into a gladiator ring, just imagine how chaotic it would feel to go from waiting outside, suddenly fighting for your life. The person who 2 seconds ago, you're like, guys, peeing on me. 2 seconds later, his head just flew off his neck. But I think when I watch this movie, it's different from when I'm watching a movie like John Wick, for example, where you could take the fight scenes from John Wick out of the plot, and I'd still enjoy them as pure spectacle. It's impressive to see these people doing these things. I think in this movie, there's no fight scenes where I'm like, oh, let me rewatch that. I'm really more there for the emotional aspect of it. I need the fight scenes to be good enough that I know who's winning, and it's exciting when Maximus is victorious, and I feel all that. But I guess I would agree that if you were to take these fight scenes out of context and just watch them on their own, I don't necessarily think I'd feel like I'm watching people do real things. Wouldn't be crazy impressed. But I don't really consider it a flaw of the movie. It kind of goes back to what I said earlier, where some of these critiques, I don't consider them negatives. It's more just a description of what the movie is.
So just a random question about that, because to make engaging fight scenes, like, I think to like break through to something that's like transcendent, like nobody's ever done this before in a fight scene, like maybe some of the things John Wick does, like that's hard and that takes some genius. But to just sort of technically execute like a good engaging fight scene that would maybe fit what Roger Ebert says a good fight scene should fit, it's like, it doesn't seem that hard. Like, you just hire the right experts or whatever, right? It's like, I guess, you know what I'm asking is like, was there an artistic choice then? If these fight scenes fall short, was it an artistic choice? Was it just where they allocated the resources? Like, sort of, how do you explain that?
Right. Well, I think first off, just to clarify one thing you said, I think it's very hard to do the fight scene right for the people actually doing it. What you meant is easy. Is from a producer standpoint, it's a question of money. It's hiring the people who know how to do that. Hire the guys who choreographed Rob Roy from 1995 and just bring them in. So why didn't they do that? I mean, this is just speculation on my part. I think for Ridley Scott, it's probably a mix of artistic choice. Like, he was explicitly going for chaos. And so if you can't see everything that's going on, that's intentional. I also feel like maybe it was a resource allocation thing. Like, again, just me guessing. He probably thought, I'm not going for, I'm not trying to make the best fight scene of all time. I just need it to be good enough. I mean, to me, Ridley Scott comes off as a very efficient filmmaker. If you listen to interviews, he often boasts about how quickly he gets movies done. Even on the commentary, talked, I forget the exact amount of time, but it was like a few weeks to shoot this movie. And sometimes I feel like you can see it in screenplays. Like, I want to make an Alien prequel. All right, get me a script. All right, this is good enough. Let's go make Prometheus.
Well, that explains Gladiator too.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of that at play here too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's like a little bit artistic decision, a little bit resource allocation is my guess.
Makes sense. After the battle, we have a nice moment. Maximus finds his old pal, his old, not necessarily his second in command, but sort of his assistant or something. He finds a loyal guy, Cicero in the mob.
Assistant, I would go for.
Yeah,
I don't think he was a fighter.
Yeah, he seemed like the administrative sort of guy.
Yeah.
He was like that guy, what was his name? Pie?
Say servant.
In Game of Thrones?
Pie.
No.
The guy that cooked pies?
Yeah. But he had a nickname too, I think.
He made the wolf bread.
The kid who's like friends with Arya?
Yeah. His name was Hot Pie.
Yeah.
Anyway, Cicero and Maximus talk very briefly, and Cicero hands Maximus a bag with, we find out later, it's Maximus's like figurines that he sculpted of his family. And Maximus tells Cicero, tell the men their general lives, because Cicero still has Maximus's army, or he's part of his army nearby. And it's being run by some fool from Rome.
Now, Cicero, so really the proper way to phrase it, yeah, Maximus spotted Cicero in the crowd, but that's because Cicero came here looking for Maximus. Now, this is one area where on the commentary track, Ridley Scott was sort of defensive. People ask, how would Cicero even know about this? And he was saying, well, Rome is probably a place you'd want to visit on vacation. So maybe Cicero has a couple weeks of, R&R. Go ahead, Daniel.
Wait. Also, sir, I forgot to mention this, but I mentioned it in passing. Right after he gives his Maximus speech to Commodus, the crowd is chanting Maximus later. Like, everybody hears at this point. Actually, I meant for us to discuss this. Everybody knows that this is Maximus Decimus Meridius, right? So people are discussing this. So I think Cicero is going to hear, right? He's probably connected. He was, an advisor to Maximus. Like, he's going to hear what's going on, I think.
Right. I think it was just a question of how fast does that word travel. And Ridley Scott was saying maybe Cicero stopped by Rome, and he's like, wait a minute, everyone's talking about this Maximus guy. And then he finds him. But yeah, really, Daniel, like you said, the short version of that. It's not a question I had because I felt the same way. Like once word gets
these people
out,
are nitpicking. I can think of several ways the word would have got to him.
And we don't even know. We don't even know how long it's been since the last battle. Maybe it's been a few days. Like, and he heard. Like, to me, yeah, it's just not a legitimate question.
Yeah. You hear that, Scott?
but also, like, so at this point though, do people know that? And I think they might, and that's okay. Do people know that this is the general that Commodus tried to have executed and stuff? Like when they're chanting his name, like do they actually know who Maximus is?
I don't know why anyone would know that he tried to have him executed. They probably don't even know how he ended up a gladiator. Maybe the mob is just ignorant. They don't even question it. I don't know.
But I guess do they know he's a general that's now a gladiator is what I'm wondering.
I guess the question is, were generals well known in general? Huh?
Nice. Well, I bet he says, my name is Maximus Decimus. I was general. Like, he gave all of his credentials. Now, I assume not everyone in the crowd was in hearing distance, but a few people were. And yeah, I don't know. How do people justify this? Are they like, I mean, these are if you had these questions back then, where would you get those answers? It's all just word of mouth and rumor. Maybe there's rumors going around about how this general ended up a gladiator. He loved killing so much that once they defeated the last barbarians of Germania, he still thirsted for blood.
Yeah, maybe they had rumors like that going around. And like, it's like a game of telephone. Everybody starts butchering his speech. People are like, yeah, and then he said to Commodus, my name is Maximus Meridian Felix, and I used to be the...
My name is Max Power.
All right, next, Commodus is crying like a loser to Senator Flacco. It doesn't make you a loser to cry, but Commodus is being a loser in this scene. Is his name Falco?
Falco, like from Super Smash Brothers.
Oh, okay. I did write Falco everywhere else. Just here I wrote Flacco. So Commodus cries to Senator Flacco. He's upset that the mob loves Maximus now for his mercy. And now he can't kill him because that would make him even more unmerciful. Falco tells Commodus that he should just kill Maximus. But Commodus refuses to make a martyr of Maximus. Suddenly, Commodus is the one speaking reason here. Maybe Falco's speaking reason. I don't know. We'll debate. Falco advises that they follow the method then of a certain sea snake. It lies at the bottom of the ocean and it allows its enemies to take small bites. And then he didn't say what happens next, but presumably then it snaps back at its enemies.
I found it difficult to follow. As I continued to watch the movie, I kept trying to map that metaphor onto what's happening. I don't know that I could really spell out the exact math of it.
I mean, I think the idea was he allowed Maximus and Lucilla and Gracchus, right, to just all continue conspiring as if they think they're getting away with it. But meanwhile, he was paying attention. He had them followed. So that was them taking little bites of him, continuing to meet. And then you saw what happened when they finally tried to execute their plan.
I think that's right. And I think very important what Alun mentioned is in this scene, he orders that every senator be followed. And that will end up being pivotal later on.
And then they all kept going like this while they were following their... It's like, okay, so you're making it obvious. All right, sorry.
Wait, I don't remember that. Who was doing that?
There were two guys that were following like Proximo and all these different, the senators and everybody, and you can obviously see them spying. Like you could see every time they turn around, their eyes are like.
I mean, they did a good job because I did not notice them being.
Maybe it was in the extended cut, Daniel. Maybe. We never really talked about that, but yeah, Lund watched an extra 30 minutes of footage that we didn't see.
I mean, I actually didn't remember those scenes like from previous viewing, so maybe it actually was in the extended cut. I don't know.
We do know in this universe, it will pay off in Gladiator II that people are really bad about making sure no one's eavesdropping, no one's following them.
I just have a lot of complaints about Gladiator 2, but let's not get into it. All right, Maximus and Cicero hatch their plan together. Cicero tells Maximus that the men have a new commander, but they will fight for Maximus. Maximus and Cicero met up again. I forget how. Cicero came to Maximus' cell or something. Anyway, all right, so they discuss that plan. So then Maximus has Cicero go to Lucilla to tell her, hey, Maximus actually does want to meet that senator now. And so then we have the meeting between Lucilla, Maximus, and it turns out Senator Gracchus. Maximus proposes to Gracchus that Gracchus buy Maximus's freedom so that he can leave Rome and take command of his army, then march on Rome, seize power from Commodus, and then hand it over to Gracchus and the Senate. Gracchus is suspicious. He's fearful what Maximus will do once he has control over Rome, but he decides to trust him because Marcus Aurelius and Lucilla both trust him. But Gracchus needs 2 days for some reason.
Maybe he had to go withdraw the funds.
I do think if you're a senator, you would hold on to like money in the event that you need to hold a coup, but whatever. Gracchus, that's not a legitimate criticism. I'm just joking. But Gracchus is so unlikable, just as a side note. Like, I can understand why Commodus hates the Senate so much. Like, Gracchus is just annoying in, like, every scene.
Isn't he, like, the only character besides Lucilla who returns for Gladiator 2?
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice. Well, I like how he's like, Maximus, help me with my plan. No. Come on, help. Fine. Oh, so you just want to be emperor. You're the one who wanted my help to begin with.
So the plan unravels immediately. Like, really immediately, to the point that it's very confusing. Because literally in the next scene, Proximo and Maximus are meeting, and Proximo tells Maximus that his plan will never work. The emperor knows too much already. So now, presumably, Maximus wants to move up the timeline, because now he starts telling Proximo, I will pay you on my return. So I think basically they don't want to wait the 2 days anymore. So he wants to be released immediately, but Proximo refuses. He trusts Maximus, but he has no interest in seeing Commodus be killed. I'm an entertainer, and Commodus makes me rich. Maximus tells Proximo that Commodus killed the man who set him free, Marcus Aurelius. Mm-hmm. That's the end of the scene. I think Proximo then agrees. Senator Gracchus gets seized by Praetorian guards because he's been getting followed. And then Commodus reveals to Lucilla that he was onto everything. He knows that Gracchus met with Lucilla, and he vows that he will make the Senate bleed. And then he makes uncomfortable advances on his sister. And then I can move on to where the plot gets foiled. But was that clear, or should we go over what's going on more clearly?
Well, here, let me summarize. I'll give it TLDR. Maximus comes up with a plot. No, they come up with a plot to overthrow Rome from the emperor. They arrest Gracchus, so they have to speed up the plan. Okay, there you go.
That's it. That's basically it. Here's why I'm a little... Okay, it's confusing because in the previous scene, like literally in one scene, they come up with a plan in 2 days. Then in the next scene, for some reason, Maximus is already expediting the plan. And then in this next scene I'm going to tell you about, Lucilla rushes to see Maximus to tell him that the plan can't wait because Commodus knows everything. But I thought Maximus already knew the plan couldn't wait. But whatever.
Well, it's confusing too because there's two things that give away the plan. He arrests Gracchus, and then it's like, oh, that's not good. But then a scene or two later, he sees Lucius playing and being like, Maximus is the savior of Rome. And Commodus is like, who said that? And that is the big clue. If they're calling him the savior of Rome, that means there's some big plot. And that seems to be the giveaway. But then, so arresting Gracchus just seems like it wasn't that big of a deal and didn't really matter until Lucius gave away the plot.
I did not interpret that as giving away anything to him. I just assumed Lucius was hearing that from general population.
Well, it was because then he puts Lucius in front of Lucilla and like threatens him. he makes reference to an old story where, and he kind of compares Lucius to a character in the story. And in that story, that character gets killed. So it's kind of a wink, wink at Lucilla. I'm going to kill him if you
Yeah,
don't confess.
and he makes a very big deal too of when Lucius says, "I'm Maximus, the savior of Rome." Commodus specifically says, "Who did you hear that from?" And then it like cuts to the next thing. It's like
maybe I just thought that was so ridiculous that I didn't want to believe it. I think that's kind of weird.
So there's a bunch of weird stuff going on, and yeah, like somehow like the following of the senators doesn't actually give away the plot, but then somehow Lucius gives it away. So this is like the part that's just clunky.
And this is why I was saying that metaphor earlier of like chewing at the sea snake was just, it feels weird once you get here. This whole thing, this is really the one part of the movie where I'm like, I don't know. It feels like a little convenient that you have a revenge plot where Maximus wants to kill Commodus, but you want it to be this heroic thing. So you've shoehorned this situation where by taking revenge, it's also attached to overthrowing Rome, restoring the Republic, and fulfilling Marcus Aurelius' dream. Now, before you say that, Daniel, you can point out all the logic of why this is happening. Like, oh, isn't it convenient? His army's there. Hey, there's an army. If you want to overthrow Rome, we can do it tomorrow. Like, it's convenient, but I can't say that wouldn't really happen. But I could say that in this story, it feels really clunky that at the 11th hour, someone runs in. Well, even before that, already Gracchus has a plot to overthrow Commodus. Like the senators are already plotting, and it's like Maximus can just slot into that plan. And then in a 15-minute span, it's like, okay, let's overthrow Rome. Oh no, Gracchus has been arrested. Let's speed up the plan. All right, let's execute the plan. Oh no, it fell apart. Oh, Maximus is arrested again. And all that is in the course of 15 minutes, when that could have been almost an entire movie. But it all happens so fast and clunky. It's a little messy.
So what I wanted to say, so I agree with all of that. But what I want to say is that they overcomplicated it completely unnecessarily. It's not hard to shoehorn making him getting vengeance also being the right thing to do for Rome. Commodus is a tyrant who just killed his father to seize power. It is very easy to set up a situation where Maximus taking vengeance like can bring back the Republic, which was his goal at the beginning of the movie. Like, there's just a lot of easy ways. The army didn't even need to be right outside Rome. Who cares? The army's somewhere. We could have instead just had a plot to escape from the cell with the help of, I don't know, some confidants in Rome. Like, Marcus Aurelius has a lot of connections. Maybe, maybe Lucilla and Gracchus work together to get some people to help break him out of jail. Or maybe Proximo releases him. Whatever. Like, he can just break out. And maybe that can get foiled. It doesn't matter, but like we just didn't need all these weird steps of like half the plot is revealed, the plot changes, like whatever. Just like the general plot could have worked, is my point. They just made it weirdly complicated.
Yeah, and I think another way to look at this is sort of where is the emotional content of the movie? And what I feel attached to is Maximus wanting to kill Commodus and avenge his family. I never really feel that invested in I want to save Rome. And I think that's partly because Maximus isn't invested in that idea. But to finally bring him over to the side of, yeah, let's go do it, I never really feel that much there. And at the end of the movie, what I feel is, spoilers, I'm glad that he killed Commodus, and I'm glad he's reunited with his family. I really never got to a point where I cared about the actual state of Rome. And it kind of feels like it's just there to embellish and justify the revenge story, but it's almost in this uncanny valley in the middle where it's somehow they needed to go further, I think, make it more of a presence in the movie, make me care about it more. What do you think? Is that resonating, Daniel?
Yeah, and the Gladiator 2 has the same issue, but on steroids.
Yeah.
Well,
except for Gladiator 2, it was like, well, go ahead, Alon.
Yeah, no, I guess I didn't really think about all this, but you guys are making some good points, and it's really making me think. But I will say, I guess Maximus doesn't personally seem to care that much about the future of Rome, and it makes us, I guess you're right, I care more about him getting his revenge than I do about Rome and its population. However, I do feel that Maximus cares about fulfilling the wishes of Marcus Aurelius. So he doesn't directly care about fixing Rome, but he does care about fulfilling the wish of an old friend. So I don't think it's like I don't care at all about that point, but I care a little bit because of that factor.
I think that's a really good point because when I think about that part of the story, saving Rome, the place my mind immediately goes is those few scenes he had with Marcus Aurelius early in the movie, and there is some emotional content there, fulfilling the promise to your friend. I think maybe just by the end of the movie, that gets maybe because these 15 minutes feel so clunky and rushed and muddled, it gets a little lost for me. But I think you're right. I think that aspect is why it doesn't fail completely. That makes it work to an extent.
So to catch you all up on where the plot stands at this point. So basically Lucilla's rushed over to Maximus and says, we gotta make this happen tonight. We don't have time. So at midnight, Proximo will release Maximus, I think because he's basically persuaded, this Commodus guy's bad. And Cicero will be waiting for Maximus. Lucilla tells Maximus that Commodus hates Maximus because Marcus Aurelius loved him and because she loved him. They kiss, and she has to leave.
Tasteful. I think I said it earlier. I'm glad they didn't go any further than that. Well, he's going to get to heaven. His first thing she does is smack him.
Okay, and then we have this
We were on a break.
So then we have the weird Lucius scene where, Lucius apparently screws everything up. Somehow he divulges the plot to Commodus. And so then we know, okay, that night something bad is going to happen. So we have the Maximus is at the barracks. He's supposed to be released at midnight. Why they waited for midnight, I don't know, but they had to. While they're waiting, the Praetorians arrive at the barracks with the intent of seizing and probably killing Maximus. But Proximo and the other slaves fight to buy time for Maximus to escape. Proximo is slain as he holds the sword given to him by Marcus Aurelius, and he shouts out shadow and dust, an homage to what he had earlier said about how they are all shadows and dust.
Yeah, not just an homage, but I forget if it was actually the same clip or an alternate take, but this is after the point where that actor had passed away, so they had to recycle some footage to make this scene work.
Really? Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that.
Oh yeah, we talked about it in the part 1 of this podcast. But it was early on and it was a while ago, so I forgive you for forgetting. Yeah, I think the original plan was for that character to live at the end of the movie, something like he was going to bury that sword in the sand. I forget. Listen to the commentary. Ridley Scott talks about it.
Maximus escapes from the prison and he finds Cicero. But they were on to the plan from the beginning, I think. Cicero has a noose around his neck, and he's sitting on a horse. And he's, from the beginning. What's the beginning? I don't know.
Right.
So Cicero's sitting on a horse with a noose around his neck. It's a pretty sick image. And when Maximus approaches, Cicero shouts to Maximus something like, no, get out of here.
I think he just said Maximus.
Oh, maybe he says Maximus.
But it was kind of implied. I think he was trying to imply don't come closer.
The horse rushes off, which leaves Cicero to hang, and Maximus is seized by the Praetorians.
Maximus is like, you crucified my friend Cicero. Like, I don't think you know what crucify means. You keep just throwing that word around.
You crucified all my friends in the prison.
I just crucified my foot.
I liked the gladiators all choosing to fight for Maximus. It was inspiring.
Yeah.
And Maximus makes a comment. He says something like, I only need a little bit of time, so don't be foolish with your lives. But wait, actually, do we see them later? Surely they all get killed at this point.
Well, not scene. All, because see Juba.
We see Juba later.
He's he's literally in the last scene of the movie. But the German dude, he, ironically, after he got shot with arrows in one of the first battles, he died by a bunch of arrows here. Ironically or coincidentally, one of those.
Irony is one of those hard things. You say something's ironic, and then it turns out it's not.
Yeah.
We could ask
wait,
ChatGPT later.
Don't call your mother an Iron. What was that?
Family Guy.
Yeah. All right, show the clip. Next.
Great banter. Great banter.
How ironic.
Hey, don't talk about your mother that way. She is not an Iron.
Have we had enough banter? Should we move on?
We can go.
Yeah.
All right, we have the aftermath of the foiling of the plot. It's Flacco again here, but
Oh boy.
Senator Falco reports the success to Commodus, that they foiled the plot, and then Commodus threatens Lucilla. If Lucilla treats him poorly, Lucius will die. If she attempts to do the noble thing and take her own life, Lucius will die. He declares that she will bear an heir for him, so that the Commodus dynasty will rule for 1,000 years. By the way, she's his sister. It's crazy.
What?
And then he declares to her, "Am I not merciful?"
I love the way he's talking about her, and then the camera turns and she's sitting right there. That was so.
That was
well done.
savage.
Yeah. Gil.
Yeah, no, he's a monster. It's just,
Really bad.
yeah. I mean, there's points in the movie where you can feel empathetic for him, and he seems human. But I'd say those moments are kind of few and far between. But there are enough of them that he's not a cartoon. By the end, you hate him. And yeah, I would say the scene helps with that.
I mean, he's the emperor, for crying out loud. He could get anybody he wants. You know, he could have girls just brought to him, and then he could create heirs left and right. You know, well, I mean, technically one heir, but he can't be. You cannot say no to him. He's wanted his sister all these years. He's gonna get his sister. Period. Pure blood.
He is really bad. One historical point is his arc here, right? You were saying how you can sort of empathize with him to some extent, right? Of course, he's evil from the beginning, but you can understand where he's coming from in some way, and he sort of goes off the deep end here. That does kind of mirror what happened with Commodus in reality, in history, is when he first took over, he wasn't, from what I understand, he wasn't really like that sadistic or anything to begin with. He was more so somebody just not that interested in ruling. Like, he wasn't really that interested in being emperor. He more so just wanted, like, the spoils, the riches of being emperor.
And that is why he must rule. Because he
Nice.
didn't want to rule.
Very wise.
But what happened during his reign was there actually did end up being some attempted plots against his life. And as those happened, he did eventually become more and more paranoid. And it kind of sent him off the deep end, where he started doing a lot crazier and crazier things. To the point where, like, eventually near the end of his reign, I mean, he completely lost it. He tried to rename Rome Commodia, like after Commodus. Yeah.
Wow.
Like, it's crazy. He renamed all the months of the year, like, after himself also.
Commoduary. Druary.
Yeah.
Commodarch. All right, sorry, continue.
But yeah, he did have this arc where, like, by the end, I mean, he just went completely off the deep end. And there's, you almost hear the story. There's, not surprisingly, I think you can kind of empathize with the real Commodus more, because he's sort of a more nuanced person in real life. Like, I remember when I heard the history, you almost feel bad for him to some extent. Like, he was a bad person and weak-willed and stuff, but you kind of hear the position of somebody to be emperor, and, like, it's a hard job, right? And then, like, people are trying to kill you, and, like, you don't know what to do, and, like, you know, you definitely could have done something better, but, like, you kind of understand how it spirals out of control.
Yeah, I think a lot of these sorts of stories, like I made a similar point about Succession, is the route they go thematically is they make these characters flawed in a way that probably a lot of people are flawed, but they're in a position where their flaws are magnified, and where you take, if a normal person lashes out because they're frustrated in the middle of an argument, they might say a couple of mean words. Commodus lashes out in the middle of an argument and he's angry. Maybe he sends somebody to be executed. Maybe he starts a war on a whim. So it takes the same flaws that a normal person has, but they're just amplified by the position they're in.
Oh, one other thing about Commodus, it's kind of interesting to contrast him with Caracalla and Geta in Gladiator II. Without getting too much into Gladiator II, but Commodus, at least, he mostly stayed in Rome. So like all of his chaos was confined to the city of Rome. Like he didn't really destroy the whole empire. Now we don't see this in Gladiator 2, but Caracalla and Geta, which by the way, it was basically just Caracalla. He kills Geta like at the beginning of his reign. I'm pretty sure. And Caracalla travels like throughout the entire empire, like destroying the whole place. Like he would go, if he were somewhere inland, he would demand fresh fish, like just to like economically ruin them, like do things that are just impossible. And then I think it was Caracalla, but there were a lot of crazy emperors. I think at one point he invites like the Parthian, like somebody from the Parthian royal family, which is his empire to the east, to like a wedding with him, I think, in the interest of peace, and then like slaughters everybody at the wedding and then declares victory over part. Like he just does absolutely insane things.
So what
Just,
was
like,
his
destroy the whole
excuse? Because
world.
now that makes me rethink. We'll criticize a movie or a show because the character's doing ridiculous things as a villain. And you're like, this is not realistic. Nobody would act like this.
Yeah.
And now you're giving me historical facts where he would go inland and demand fish. So I can't say that's not realistic. It happened in real life.
That was the point. I did make this point though at the beginning, which is like Caracalla he's like absolutely sadistic and horrible. I'm pretty sure. Like I don't know that the characters in Gladiator 2 were actually that like ahistorical.
Okay.
I think Commodus was a little more of a regular person, but also sadistic and horrible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think we'll have ChatGPT fact check me later.
I'll have to cut out every time he says that.
All right. One other thing on this scene quickly, but Commodus at one point says like Commodus the Merciful, like saying that that's how he's going to be known. Gave me really like vibes from The Pianist. Remember the Nazi, the guy who ran the camp, looking at the mirror going, I pardon you. Like he had this feeling of like he's God because he would pardon people.
Schindler's List.
Oh, sorry, Schindler's List.
Yeah, because Schindler tells him there's real power in letting someone live or something like that. And so he decides to try it out. And he's like, I pardon you. And then it just didn't. He was like, nah, I didn't really like that.
We are coming up on the final battle with Maximus in chains after his plot was foiled and his fellow gladiators and Senator Gracchus behind bars. And I think they're like in bars, like looking at him in chains, it seems like. Do you know if that was the case? Were they all in the same room?
I mean, they couldn't have been far away because at the end when he says to release them, they came out immediately.
It seems like they're... So the reason I say this is because then Commodus comes to see Maximus, and I think all of this actually happens in front of all the fellow gladiators, although it's like a little unclear with the camera angles. But anyway, we have this final conversation between the two of them. Commodus tells Maximus that they're going to fight each other in the arena. Commodus tells Maximus that they both loved his father, Marcus Aurelius, and that makes them brothers. So he gives Maximus a hug and stabs him in the back, because that's what you do to family. I was going to make a reference to something else, but I guess I don't want spoilers. And then he orders Quintus to strap on Maximus's armor and seal the wound. And they also conceal the wound.
Yeah.
It's an important difference because seal makes it sound like he's treating the wound. And so, why'd you cut him?
Sorry, continue.
Do we want to get into... Oh, well, okay, before we get into the battle, I mean, this scene, epic scene.
Yeah.
Awesome scene. And there was some of the dialogue I really like where Commodus says something to Maximus like, you think I'm afraid to fight you? And Maximus says, I think you've been afraid all your life.
Mm-hmm. I like how earlier in the movie when Commodus is talking to Marcus Aurelius, he said, I have courage, maybe not on the battlefield. And then here he has an opportunity to show his courage in a battle or a fight. And first thing he does is cheats and stabs his opponent in the back because he knows he would lose in a fair fight. So, hey, listen, he admitted it. He didn't have courage on the battlefield.
No, he's also very overconfident because this is the second time he's like, I have a foolproof plan. Like, it's like a pretty wild plan. I'm going to wound Maximus just enough that I can beat him in battle, but not so bad that it's obvious to everyone I cheated. Because what he's trying to do here, correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, but he has a PR problem. He can't kill Maximus. But if he brings him out into the Colosseum and gives him a fair shot, then the audience will be more okay with him killing him.
I think that's the idea.
Yeah, so he's trying to thread a very fine needle here.
But I don't get, why didn't he just do tigers again? Tigers was such a great plan. You know, they
We
always
just
do
need
that.
more
They try,
tigers.
Yeah. You know, they try something once and then they give up. Like, it was a good idea. Just keep doing the tigers. A wounded Maximus.
If he had done the paper cut plus the tigers, then I think it would have
Paper
worked.
guy. I think he would have been too concerned about Maximus, holding him to the tigers.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
A
Yeah.
wounded Maximus fights Commodus. When Maximus slices Commodus's arm, my notes are so bad. He drops his arm.
Falcon punch, and then max power.
Maximus slices Commodus's arm. Pow! And then Commodus drops his sword because his arm got cut. So he demands another sword from Quintus, but he refuses. Commodus starts yelling at all the Praetorians, "Hand me his sword, hand me his sword." But Quintus orders, "Sheathe your swords." Nobody tosses him a sword. Maximus is on the brink of death. He starts to see visions of the afterlife. While this is happening, Commodus pulls a dagger out of his sleeve, but Maximus beats him with his fists alone. He then seizes the dagger and shoves it into Commodus's throat. Maximus has taken his vengeance. He's taken the last life he needed to take, and he collapses, entering the afterlife. But he pulls himself away from the afterlife for just a moment to give his commands to Quintus. "Free my men. Senator Gracchus is to be reinstated. And there was a dream that was Rome. It shall be realized. These are the wishes of Marcus Aurelius." And I think he also says to bring back the Republic or something. I don't have that as a bullet, but I feel like he said that.
Here's what I wonder. So, did Commodus get a single hit on Maximus in this fight? Did he, besides before the fight with the concealed?
Well, that was a
wound?
pretty good hit he had the first time. We should give him credit
Right.
for
But
that.
I don't think the crowd saw any attacks on Maximus that would be fatal. So I wonder from an audience member's perspective, how the hell did Maximus just die?
Yeah, I bet. Well, first off, they see him pull the dagger out, which that was cheating, right?
Yeah.
Because first he asks for a sword. He's trying to make it look like this fight is still somewhat legitimate. And then when he doesn't get one, he says, "Okay, I'm going to reveal I concealed this weapon." So maybe by that point they realized there was some shenanigans. And again, the rumor mill. I'm sure there's a lot of ideas out there. He was poisoned, maybe he was something else.
Maximus collapses. Lucilla rushes to his side. She tells him, "Go to them." And he enters the afterlife, reuniting with his family. Lucilla then shouts to the crowd, "Is Rome worth one good man's life? We believed it once. Make us believe it again. He was a soldier of Rome. Honor him." She said, she doesn't shout to the crowd. She says it to Senator Gracchus.
His name was Maximus Decimus Meridius, father to a murder.
We have a really heartwarming scene where Gracchus, the Praetorians, and the freed slaves, the gladiators, all carry Maximus's body together, and they leave Commodus's body in the arena. And then I'll get to the epilogue in a moment with Juba, but discuss.
Great scene.
Yeah, I think maybe the most interesting choice is the way he kills Commodus is so up close and personal. And it does bring back one little moment of humanity before it ends. Because no matter how horrible somebody is, to just see the person's pleading eyes as you slowly sink the knife into their throat, it's very exciting. It gets you very... I'm just kidding. I was trying to turn that into I really want to murder someone.
Oh,
No,
I
it's
was just like, yeah.
Yeah, I
Sounds
wasn't getting
good.
the reaction I was looking for. I was, it's disturbing. I mean, you really see the lights go out.
Yeah.
But it reminded me of Saving Private Ryan. There's a moment that it's like the one moment in that movie, not the one, but one of the moments that most haunts me from the first time I saw it is when these two characters have a hand-to-hand fight. and one of them gets on top of the other and starts sinking the knife into him, and he's just going, wait a minute, and that's all he can say before the knife goes into his heart, or maybe his throat, I forget, and he dies. It's such an up close, personal way to kill somebody. I think it's a bold choice for someone who's a villain, because in most movies, you don't want the audience to empathize with the villain the moment they're dying. You just want to root, yeah, we got the kill. But I thought this was an interesting way to go.
And I think there was something, too, to the fact that, Commodus is still holding the dagger himself, right? And it's Maximus, like, grabs his hand and uses it to shove it in. And I think there's, like, this idea there, right, that it's all Commodus's fault, right? Like, this blood is all on Commodus's hands. And I really like the choice of they make the death not that triumphant. There's triumph at the end, but, like, the death is gruesome. And maybe the movie is making up for the glorification of the violence in this movie. Right? To bring it back to one of Gil's points, which is, like, it is showing at the end.
I was planning on cutting out of the podcast.
I'm sorry. But, it shows, look, this is the violence you wanted. And it's still rough.
I liked it.
Yeah,
I know. Just another indication to Commodus that no matter what happens to Maximus, he will always be stronger than you. It's nothing, because even in his weakened state, he could overpower him.
And in Maximus's death, he has his family waiting for him. And who does Commodus have? He's going straight to hell, probably.
Yeah, I'd like to see the visions that he saw. Like, what was the heaven or afterlife that he saw?
Would you be super annoyed if his visions were just, like, the same?
though he would be probably, he'd be like, a wheat field? This sucks. And Maximus, like, this is awesome.
Yeah, I love wheat. I'm gonna make so much bread. So you make bread, right? Wheat bread.
Sure.
And if it's barley, you can make beer. Final scene of the movie, we see Juba is freed. We see him bury Maximus's figurines of his family, and he says, "Now we are free. I will see you again, but not yet." And we love that line, but not yet, because Juba is not going to meet Maximus in the afterlife just yet. He's going to hold on so that he can go see his family, because his family is still alive. And earlier in the movie, Juba said he never thought he would see his family again. And it's this nice ending. Maximus is reunited with his family in the afterlife, which is definitely the worst deal compared to Juba being reunited with his family in real life. But it's great. It's like I think it's nice that, Maximus dies at the end, but at least we get the positive note of Juba is still alive to enjoy his life.
And I'm pretty sure you can see a blood stain from Commodus in the middle of the field, in the middle of the Colosseum there during that last scene, which I like.
Yeah, I feel like I want to say more, but I feel like we've alluded to this ending enough times, and I feel like I've said a lot that applies here, which is just the satisfaction of these moments. They land so well when he gives the speech to the emperor, "My name is Maximus Decimus." Like, it really lands. And the death, the way that they've been building up to him reuniting with his family, and then to finally see it happen after he takes revenge and simultaneously restores Marcus Aurelius' dream, dies knowing that his wishes will be fulfilled, his men will be freed, etc. It's a happy ending that doesn't feel... it's pretty amazing that they pull it off, because it really does feel, we've said it a few times, they found a way to have their cake and eat it too. He dies, but he goes to heaven to reunite with his family. And by getting revenge, he saves everybody. And yes, we get to revel in the violence, but don't forget, violence is also terrible. I feel like they threaded such a needle enough that the moment lands so well. And I think a lot of that is, like I said at the front of this, it comes down to Russell Crowe it's a tough character to pull off, because he doesn't have a lot to do. He has to be stoic. And for some people, that clearly didn't land, like Roger Ebert. But for other people, I think the stoicism here works when it's in the context of everything around him being so terrible. Having Commodus being more emotional, throwing mud at him, and Maximus just not falling for it, not taking the emotional, reckless route. When he does nothing, it's satisfying to watch. And what Russell Crowe is doing is the work with his face and his eyes to show us what's simmering beneath the surface. You feel the rage constantly, plus the Hans Zimmer score. I think all of that makes these moments land so strongly, and it's why years later, the movie still resonates.
Well said.
Strength and honor.
There's another moment where I didn't mention it, but Russell Crowe says the same line twice. Marcus Aurelius had a dream that was Rome, Proximo. This is not it. This is not it. That's the other thing Russell Crowe did. It was the simmering beneath the eyes, but also repeating lines twice. And maybe that was the script, not Crowe's choice.
That's when Proximo shouts out, by the way, in response to Maximus saying this is not like the dream. Proximo says, "We are but shadow and dust." Shadow and dust. I think he also repeats it.
I'm going to start doing that more in my everyday life. Yeah.
I should start doing that. Doing that.
So
There you go. Yeah.
There's nothing. I did the epilogue. There's no. Okay, the credits. There was a
boy.
credit sequence, I believe. Let me pull it up quickly.
Oh boy.
Actually, my rental on YouTube ran out. That's right. I paid for it. I paid $4.
This is where Noel shows up and he's like, "You will watch." Are you waiting for me to take the reins back?
No. I have the reins. I am keeping the. Well, you thought just once I seized the reins, I would just happily give them back? No, I got these.
I feel like
reins.
right now, I think you would be happy to give them back, is what it looks like. Like, I think I rented this. What was that, Noel? Yeah, Venom. That's funny.
One sec. I have things I want to do with these reins. First, I'd like to rename the podcast. You know, like Commodus, rename.
I got it. And then you're going to start renaming
Daniel
days of the
Cast.
week.
You know what? I would like to, for the time being, temporarily delegate authority over the reins back to Alun. Alun,
All
please
right,
take
and
it
I
away.
delegated to Gil.
All right, just temporarily so I can turn us into a Senate, blah, blah, blah. I got it. All right, well, I think that wraps up our discussion on Gladiator. I don't know if we're going to do a full episode on Gladiator 2. It feels like with a brand new movie, you kind of capture the moment or you don't. And it came out. Now we got Thanksgiving coming up. And not to spoil, well, we've already given our thoughts on the movie, basically. I don't know how compelled we'll be. Well, I think the movie's doing well. I don't know. We'll see after Thanksgiving if we want to come back to Gladiator 2. Or, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff we want to talk about, like Arcane Season 2. And I'm still rewatching Season 1 in preparation to finally go and watch Season 2. But I don't know, Daniel, do you want to just give a quick Emperor style? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down on Gladiator 2.
Wait, and thumbs up means?
Live.
We're going to go with modern rules. So thumbs
Okay.
up is good, thumbs down is bad. Oh, all the way down. So for listeners, Daniel just gave a thumbs firmly in the down position. 2 thumbs down he gave it.
For Gladiator 2?
Yeah,
That bad, huh? Wow.
I was upset.
What did you think, Alon? Yeah, thumbs slightly above halfway. I think I probably agree with that. It's I think the TLDR for me would be that it's essentially a complete copy of the first movie, but everything is done a little bit worse. Except maybe you could argue, I mean, some of the action is cool, but then it has so much more CGI, it undoes some of the additional spectacle. And I would say it's missing a lot of the emotional core that this movie had. And I feel like it, now, I'm not going to, maybe I should just say, if you don't want any spoilers for Gladiator 2, just stop listening now. I'll give a vague spoiler here. The lack of an emotional core. In this movie, Gladiator 1, it was sort of a revenge plot. And I feel like in Gladiator 2, it felt like, okay, we have the revenge angle because his wife gets killed, but it's not enough. And we kind of reveal who the villain really is at the end, and we don't hate him enough. So let's do a second revenge that will be resolved within 7 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it really doesn't work. But I would just say, if I just go on the feeling while watching the movie, was I bored the entire time? No, I was probably entertained about 80% of the time, but there's nothing to it beyond that. There's no lasting impact, especially, again, because it's all so familiar. We've seen it before. So it's a somewhat okay time at the theater, but I'd say really nothing beyond that. I thought Paul Mescal, who played the main character, thought he did a solid job. He was kind of Maximus with slightly more, a little less stoic. He would throw you a kind of sly grin here and there. I thought he did a pretty good job.
I really, really disliked it. I was bored a lot of the time because, look, I love seeing Roman stuff, right? Like so they had so much going for it. Like I love Roman stuff in general, but like just the plot, it just dragged and had no emotional weight behind it. Where like, okay, we have a cool battle at the beginning, and his wife is killed, and it didn't really land. Like I didn't really feel emotional stakes because I don't know, like there was a lot, and I don't know if it's Paul Mescal's acting or the writing, but I didn't really feel like I never connected with his like misery or anything. Like I never really connected with like the same way I felt the misery and pain that Maximus felt. I never felt it for the guy in Gladiator 2. And honestly, like the scene after his wife is killed, he's already kind of making jokes about stuff and laughing. And it's like, maybe that's his personality. Okay. But like, I don't know. I need to see the pain, right? Like I need to really connect with it. And then at the same time, the whole movie, we know he's Maximus's son. We know there's going to be this big reveal because they had it in the trailer, and you guys explained to me that it was in the trailer. But like we already knew that, and they're seeding it from the beginning. But it's like for half the movie or more than half the movie, they're laying these seeds. So it's like this super extended Act 1 where you're just kind of waiting. Like, can we get into because like apparently the vengeance isn't going to be the real story because the real story has to be the fact that he's secretly Maximus's son. So the whole time I'm waiting, like, okay, his wife stuff, that was boring. We don't care about her. Let's get to the real story. And then like the real story comes together at like the end of the movie. And the whole time I just kept wondering like when the movie was going to start. Like yeah, I was really annoyed
in
by
some ways, that sounds like Gladiator 1, where saving Rome really comes into focus more toward the end of the movie. But like we talked about already, it was way more seated, and it was tied to a face, Marcus Aurelius, who mattered to the main character. So there was some emotion behind that. Plus, before Maximus loses his family, you have all the buildup of, I want to go home. The farm, it's going to be beautiful. You don't get the same degree of that with Paul Mescal's character. And it's because it's such a copy, then you end up, at least personally, I end up getting a little pulled out of the movie where I'm like, oh, I wonder what his heaven thing is going to be. For Maximus, it's putting his hand on the wheat field. Oh, for him, it's
he sees a Grim
Virgil
Reaper
on the. Well, I'm assuming it's like the poet Virgil. He's the one who like welcomes you to the afterlife.
But it's literally like a modern Grim Reaper. Like it's a guy in a hood with like with a scythe.
Oh, did he have the scythe? Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty
but
sure.
Yeah, so in the moment, I'm like a little bit of, oh man, that sucks. Like everyone's dying. But then I'm also like, oh, that's the choice they made. Like it becomes a logistical question, the kind of thing you would do in a franchise movie. Of like, what's his heaven vision?
And the repetition of lines from the old movie, that's painful. Lame. And like random things too, like just repeating the fragment of I will never be your instrument in this life or the next. Like what?
It was so random.
Like some of them make sense, right? Like things that are a creed, like strength and honor, stuff like that. But I don't mind a little bit of that, but I think I defended it in Alien Romulus, but I think I'm more okay with it in a movie like that than Gladiator, where I want it to some extent to feel like a historical account, even though it's super embellished and dramatized. It feels cheesier in this context than it does when you're floating in zero gravity shooting at aliens.
Oh my god! I mean, another thing too, like, sorry, but like his whole character arc, like. So his whole goal is vengeance on the general. When he finally faces off with the general near the end of the movie, he runs out like a madman ready to kill him. And then the general says a few things about how like I like your father, I love your wife. And just immediately the Paul Mescal's character just changes. Like you just can't go through that whole transformation in like 10 seconds. Like it just doesn't land.
Yeah. All right. Well, if this were a full Gladiator 2 review, we would have more to say. But in case we don't get to it, you can at least have that taste. You have an idea what we think. And it seems like go ahead, Daniel.
Well, and if you want us to do one, like leave a comment. We're extremely swayed by people's opinions. Like honestly, if a few people leave like really encouraging comments, I can't promise, but I bet we'd probably do it.
Probably. Yeah, I see one comment about how Gladiator isn't that good, and then the entire tone of the review is me defending it against this one anonymous person. Yeah, so we are definitely very easy to sway. If you tell us you want Gladiator 2, we'll either give it to you, or it'll keep me up every night for the next year when I think about how I let down that one commenter. So
that is
you have
true.
all that power.
There are people who have left comments like asking for a certain video, and Gil's responded saying like, "Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna do that." And then like if Gil hasn't had time to do it, he will like he'll feel so bad about it.
I will deliver sometimes though. There was one where I was haunted by a comment from at least 3 years ago where somebody asked for more of a certain type of content, and I kept saying I'm going to do it, and then eventually he got so sick of waiting he unsubscribed. And he announced it. He was like, and thus, he did it in a very, felt like a scene out of Gladiator. And he was like, and alas, I unsubscribe. And then like 3 years later, I did another video in that genre. And he came back and he was like, finally, you did it. I'm resubscribing.
Wait, what was the genre?
Yeah, I don't know why I was playing coy about it. It was when I did when I covered those Alien comics, Fire and Stone, where it was like a follow-up to Prometheus. He was like, I want more Alien Predator content. And then finally, 3 years later, re-released those comics, did another comic, and of course did the Alien timeline. So he's got plenty of Alien Predator content, and there's more on the way.
I've been begging you for years to do more Scooby-Doo comic recaps.
I think that one might have been scrubbed from the internet. I'm not sure. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining. I want to apologize if I was a little bit off or quieter in the second half, because when we started, I was feeling like a little sick, and it's just been getting progressively worse throughout this recording. My head really hurts. So
me too.
That's good.
Huh.
We're about to go into
great.
like this is about to turn into found footage. Where we've just discovered the first like human virus that travels through the internet. Nobody record any podcasts. Okay. Well, thank you everyone. Now I want to apologize if I was a little off at all for the last hour or so.
Try to be cool like Maximus, repeating everything twice.
Yeah. No, it's like amnesia because I'm so woozy. Anyway, before we wrap, okay. Thanks everybody. That's been Gladiator. Great job, Daniel.
Strength and honor.
Strength and honor. Let's just end it on that.
Strength and honor. Strength and honor.
Strength and
Strength and honor.
Strength and honor.
Strength and honor. I want to do it once together.
Strength and honor. Uh-oh, one's frozen for me, anyway.
Really? Daniel said it was fine. We just threw a test.
Yeah, I think it's in your end, Gil.
Okay. Well, interesting. Well, I thought you